Monday, October 22nd, 2018. As required by open meeting law, you are hereby notified and informed that the town will be video and audio taping as well as live broadcasting this public meeting. In addition, anyone in the audience who plans to video or audio tape this meeting must notify the chairman prior to the start of the meeting. Hearing no one, please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Anybody for a weekly briefing? We have Officer John Sullivan, graduation from the FBI Academy. Good evening, Chief.
Madam Chair, members of the board, good evening. Before I have John come up and regale you with his stories from the National Academy, I just wanted to set the record straight on something. We have been informed that some 36 years ago, another member of Harwich Police attended the National Academy. His name was Norm Fennell, and he attended in the early 80s and graduated and then later became chief, 88 to 90, I believe. So John, however, he is not the first. It is still a big deal. So I'm going to not tie up the mic anymore, and I'll let him explain to you what happened down there.
Thank you, Chief. Good evening, John.
Good evening. I can give you a basic summation. It was a 10-week course. It took place in the FBI, their academy complex, which is located in the Quantico military base at Quantico, Virginia. I was there with over 230 officers from all over the country and 25 international countries as well. Everywhere from Central Europe to Mongolia. One of the guys in my PT section was from Mongolia, of all places. It was one of the best things. It lived up to its billing. It was one of the best things I've ever participated in. I met people I never would have had a chance to. We had one of the speakers, just for instance, that spoke to us was Saddam Hussein's case officer. He was the only American to be with him. He was with him from the moment he was captured, until they could fly him out there, until his execution. He gave an excellent speech to us. It was just, slice of life stuff, but it was very nice. We had leaders from all over the country speak to us. It's basically a collegiate atmosphere. I lived in a dorm, which was different. I had a roommate and a suite. We had what's called a suite. We had 2 guys, a bathroom, and 2 other guys. So there were 4 adults that usually don't do this, sharing a bathroom. So that was an adjustment for a while. My roommate was head of the Ohio State SWAT team, so state police SWAT team. So he took control of all the times and all that. So that was very very good with that. Like I said, they call it the 3 stools. I won't hold you guys. They do learning, and it's UVM credits. You can actually use these credits towards your college education. They're considered college level courses. I took courses in forensics, leadership, anti-terrorism, and constitutional law. And one of the classes was that speaker class I just spoke to you of. And the most fun, the one of all the things that I did was the PT class, where they really push not only physical wellness, but mental wellness. And I have a lot of stuff in a big pack, and when I can catch up, because we switched duties, the other lieutenant and I, when I can catch up with everything, I'm going to unleash that on all the young guys, and hopefully the old guys too, because as I was telling people before, I like to just tell people this because they don't understand, police work's a very stressful job. And the average age in civilian life for a heart attack is 67. The average age in law enforcement is 44. Wow. So, our job is killing us. So I'd like to see if I can incorporate that, working out. Like I said, I was rather portly when I went. I left in fairly decent shape, I have to admit. They did a job on me. And and so, like I said, I appreciate the chief for pushing to send me. It lived up to its billing. It was the most wonderful thing. I think the next to I always tell people my marriage and birth of my children is probably the greatest thing that I've ever done. So I have to add that because my wife gets very mad. I don't have my marriage, but I just did the birth of my kids. So.
Oh, now you just gave it away.
Yeah. But anyway, like I said, I hate saying it because it sounds silly sometimes when I hear myself say it, but it did change me. it's designed to make better leaders, and I think it did. It's funny, I still text them every other day or so. I met some of the greatest guys I've ever met. They're all law enforcement officers, roughly my age, roughly my years' experience. It was just nice to interact with all of them during that time, so.
That's great, and thank you for coming. That sounds like an impressive course.
It was wonderful.
Yeah, we're lucky to have you, so thank you.
Oh,
Does
thank you
anyone
very
have
much.
any questions or
No, thank you,
comments?
John.
Yeah, thank you for your time.
Thank you very
John.
much. Anyone else for a weekly briefing? Carolyn?
I know Richard was here last week to thank everyone who helped. We had a lot of success with our boutique, so thank you very much. But now I'm back again because it's time to do the support our troops, equally as important, and I know it seems early, but we do have to have the packages out so they can be mailed by November 16th. So there's a box at the front of the community center. There are these flyers all around and on our website of things that we need, toiletries, crossword puzzles, things like that, just small things. If you're at a store, just drop those off for us. We would really appreciate it so we can send those out. It's hard to think about. You're in a nice dorm. Imagine the people who aren't, maybe in a little tent. So, and then of course our Halloween party is coming up with the Recreation Department and the Council on Aging. We all work together. Channel 18, that is on October 31st. And it promises to be, as always, a safe Halloween. And we'd like to thank all of the local businesses. We're up around 75 pizzas donated so far, candy coming in, prizes, so we're doing well. Thank you.
Great, thank you, Carolyn. On to public comments and announcements. The wastewater support committee update, Sharon.
All right, Sharon Flieger, wastewater support. I know I'm going to be doing an annual update on the 13th, but this was kind of a message that we wanted to get out. I was not in town for about 2.5 months, but was taking quite a few emails. And some of the questions that kept coming up, I'm going to address just a few of them right now. I had some questions as to why we don't have our meeting information on the website, which we're going to try to get on there. But for the record, we are meeting the first Tuesday of the month at 8:30 in the morning here in Town Hall in the Griffin Room. We also meet the fourth Thursday of the month in the evening at 6 o'clock, also here. Now, there are times when we have to switch things around or we have to cancel them. So I'm telling people to look on the website. If the agenda isn't there for a Tuesday or a Thursday, there isn't going to be any meeting. So that kind of what maybe help clarify a little bit as to when we're meeting. And again, they can check on the website for that under the wastewater button. The other thing I wanted to bring up is that to let some people know that we do have the homeowner sewer guide or sewer connection guidebook. It is on the website, but it is under the new documents. So to look for it there if you go on our website. There's also the 5-step hookup, all right? And I wanted to thank the committee as well as Megan and Dan for what I think is an excellent job on those 2 documents. They're worthwhile looking at, but I think we need to find a way of maybe getting it out to some of the people that aren't here year-round. So I have some proposals I want to take up with Larry at some point. Okay, the other one is just a quick update on some of the things that are coming up. On October 25th, all right, which would be one of our meetings, we at the committee are going to be at the Dennis Harwich Yarmouth meeting. So we won't be having one, but we will be there just to listen. The other one is going to be on October 30th at 9 a.m. and Michael Locke, who's the executive director of the Harwich Conservation Trust, is going to be doing a walking tour for us of the Cold Book Project. All right, it's something that the committee has been asking for. Anybody else that would like to show up and tag along are certainly welcome. And we're going to be meeting at the Old Harbor Masters building. I hope everybody knows where that is.
203 Bank Street.
There we go.
The old fire station.
All right. November 6th, obviously, we are not having a meeting. We want everybody out voting, so don't come to our meeting. There's going to be one on Tuesday, November 13th, and that Heinz Proft, who is our Director of Natural Resources, is going to be providing some information on our monitoring program, which was part of our CWMP. And he's going to give us an update and just information regarding what does he do, when he does it, where the results are, where they go, and what they mean. The last one, November 22nd, we also are not having a meeting due to Thanksgiving. That's basically all I have for now. We'll do a little better on the 13th.
Great, thank you very much, Sharon, that's helpful. Don?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just wanted to make sure, because we use the words wastewater so often about so many different things that people are probably, if they're not really following this, may not be understanding. That meeting on the 25th is not for the sewering of East Harwich. That's to discuss the tri-town possibilities between Yarmouth, Dennis, and Harwich. And it's also a public meeting, so people could go to that at the Dennis Senior Center.
To make a little point to clarify that, people are referring to the DHY, and that's exactly what it stands for. So when you hear us say DHY, that's Dennis, Harwich, and Yarmouth.
Yeah, I just want to make sure that the
Yes.
public understood
Good
there's two
point.
separate things going on.
Thank you.
Thank you, Sharon. And, excuse me, any further public comments or announcements? No? On to the consent agenda. Ed?
Well, Madam Chair, I'd like to present the consent agenda and move approval of the items thereon, including the approval of the minutes of October 1st, 2018 regular session, and to accept a gift to be deposited in the Council on Aging gift fund.
Moved and seconded. Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
On to public hearings and presentations, the annual meetings, the Community Center Facilities Committee.
Good evening.
Good evening.
You have our report. I don't know if anybody has any questions for the Facilities Committee.
Does anybody have any particular questions? Did you want to go over anything briefly, or?
We're going great guns. The Facilities Committee is in the process of reviewing our fee structure. Other than that, Sundays are going so-so. We have more people using the weight room than we do having them using the gym. But we'll continue to keep track of attendance over there on Sundays. But right now, it's been very, very light.
Thank you, Lee. Nobody, any questions?
No, just thank you, Lee. Thank you for the report, and thank you, committee, for all the work you're doing.
Ed? Don?
Thanks, Lee.
Thank you very much.
Ditto.
Thank you.
Okay, on to the Golf Committee report. Oh, Carolyn, sorry.
We're going to do
Sorry.
the cultural center at the same time, since it's
Okay.
all,
No problem, no,
Fine.
that's good.
so we'll go fast through it. You know me, you certainly know Erica, and I don't know if a lot of you have had the pleasure to meet Brian Feedy, who was born and raised here in Harwich and is back here with us. So I'm going to go quickly through this, but honestly, they are really holding the fort down and running all of the programs. The creative placemaking is really the new words that we're using and is adopted by the Cultural Council. It's really just describing places like we have over at the Cultural Center, where people come together and enhance art for the economic development, the betterment of the town. I should have memorized it, but I didn't. But we're going to give you all this. I know you want to go fast, so. Arts Matter. You'll see all of us wearing our Arts Matter. There are these forms. Please take a minute and just fill it out. Arts Matter because, and you get to fill in what that means. That day is on October 26th, so you'll be seeing those. Brian's doing a phenomenal job with our Facebook page, and we have a lot of new and exciting things going on over there. It's continuing to grow. 33 long-term studios have been established at the center. 32 studios are occupied. The last one is one of the portables in the far back. Coming to you soon, saying we're all full. We do have a wait list, but that's not the most desirable one, so. We have 53 occupants with 44 rental agreements. There is a wait list. We are working on the kitchen. That space is really what we're really focusing on now. Both Erica and Brian have done a phenomenal job. The one side of the building is up and running. We have the other side really at a good point now. The cafeteria is being rented. The library is being rented. So we're now going to focus a lot on the kitchen. There are 11 double studios, 16 singles, 1 triple. Just to give you an idea of what we're bringing in, it's approximately $1,100 a month, so that's just in the studios.
11,000.
11,000. Sorry, I'm trying to go fast. Thank you. Hashtag inspires Harwich. You're going to see this a lot. We use this all the time. Ryan came up with it. It's really caught on. So this is the maker space. I don't know. I know you have this report. It's online for you. So just some of the things that are happening, we wanted to give you a quick look at. If I forget anything, you jump in. The programs and events, they're steadily expanding, but that doesn't mean that we don't have space for more. So this is my plug to the public. If you're looking for space or an activity or an event you haven't been, we have an auditorium, we have a library, we have a music room. We have what you need. Come on in. How's that? We want you to teach classes there too. This is just some of the people that have already used the center and of course are coming back because it's amazing there. Again, these are some of the classes that we're offering, from the makers to painting to drawing, and it's just growing. This was so much fun. We had the school over on their first field trip. Erica participated and was part of the rainstorm. We worked with the Blue Institute, which is one of the groups inside the building, and the schools. It really all came together. It was really nice. You did a good job, Erica. Good.
It was a great partnership. They all enjoyed it. All 6 kindergarten classes came over. It's a nice walking field trip, so there's no additional staff needed. So it really worked out well. It was a great partnership.
And we plan on doing more of those this year. We've already met with them to see what else we can do. The junior theater was there. The Cape Cod Theater Company, sorry. Junior theater, the junior players were there this summer, and it was a great success. It brought in a whole new dynamic of people. We use the auditorium more. We're going to get some beautiful fans to keep them cooler over there. But other than that, we're hoping they're coming back. It's a little warm. Of course, the Harwich Cranberry Arts and Music Festival was there. And they had a concert series that I would say was a great success, no problems. I think everyone who came was looking forward to having more there. We started a volunteer program. This is another big plug. We love volunteers. So they're sitting at the front desk, they're giving tours of the building, they're helping to bring new ideas. If you're interested, please contact anybody here. One of the fundraisers that we did raise, $350 for the Harwich Elementary School Parent-Teacher Organization. Again, we're trying to partner and utilize that space as much as we can for all of the community. And the school and the children is really one of the areas that we're focused on. Erica did a great job with that. Brian takes amazing pictures and makes us look good over there. We partner with the Chamber of Commerce, of course, and if you were there last year, you'll know that we'll be having our open house again. And the big guy in the red suit, that'll be Santa. We'll be back again. So look for us and information on that. Did I forget anything?
Art Week.
Oh, yeah, the last one. I'm sorry. Art Week. I was here so much last year telling you all about Art Week. Well, both Erica and Brian have gone out of their way to make it town-wide this year, and their early publicity for Art Week all over Massachusetts, guess who it's including? already, town of Harwich. So we are just in the forefront of that. So I just wanted to bring you up to date on what's happening over there when we were doing the community center. Please, everybody, I'm going to give this to Bill, too, to make sure he puts in the paper, why art matters to you. Did I forget anything? And if you have a moment, please stop by and see both Erica and Brian. They're doing an amazing job over there.
Our beautiful new office.
Oh, and our new office. We have moved offices. When the harbor moved out, we have taken over that first office. Brian painted it, so it looks 100 times better than when they were in it, so. Just kidding. 200 times, so, thank you.
Thank you very much, Carolyn. That's excellent. Great report. Golf Committee?
Thank you. That's good. Everybody got my report, and you successfully were able to open it?
Yes, we were.
That's good. It's okay. The world's not gonna end. Folks, while she's getting organized, the committee actions, I think, were pretty straightforward. I doubt whether you have any questions, but the committee at large has been very successful as far as attendance is concerned, I think, overall. And, you know, our operational calendar, which includes the months of April through December. And in the review of the 2018 year, I think it's important to note that with the help of the selectmen, we were able to replace two very strong committee members who've since retired, Bob Kingsbury and Jeff Williams, I'd like to acknowledge. And they were replaced by Steve Bellotta, a new member with an extensive business background, as well as Jack Conley. And they are going to be, I think, very productive members of our team. The standing committee includes John Crook, who's been very instrumental in a lot of ways as far as progress within the committee. Martha Duffy, who's the vice chair. Tom Johnson, who's been there for the last 10 years, along with myself. John Wheeler as well. So I like the way you click. Yeah, you can click. Thanks. And of course, first and foremost, this year is a capital endeavor. Our cart barn project is still a work in progress. We're about 95% complete. And you know, for the general public that doesn't get up to the golf course, this afternoon I was jealously going down to harbors and waterways at Saquatucket to look at their project because they're further along than we are. But overall, when you go through this town, I think it's commendable. You know, when you think about the Monomoy School, the harbors in particular, and I went up and looked at the new fire station in progress. We're right in line with all these very progressive changes that are going on within the town. It's okay. I just wanted to get up to, I want to get up to the cart barn status. Okay? Yeah, yeah, terrific. And the point is, we're 95% complete, but I think a lot of people did not realize that this project also includes a car park renovation. In other words, the parking in and around the clubhouse, electrification, a solar component, which is extremely progressive. We've had a lot of great feedback already, and it's not in place. A clean water recycling system. So those are some of the add-ons that will be in place by hopefully the spring of 2019. That's the goal as it stands. And then, James, if we go to the USGA consultation. Yeah, thank you. We continue to consult with the USGA, the United States Golf Association. It's a service provided. We pay for it. It's short money. It assists the superintendent of the green, Sean Fernandez, and his crew with an outstanding insight as to what we're doing and, if necessary, how we can do things better. Also, because people like to eat, I get more questions about the hot stove and our restaurant facilities up at the golf course. And the good news is contract negotiations are underway, and I've got my fingers crossed. Also, another contract service that's been very instrumental in helping us promote Cranberry Valley and contribute to the golf experience is the Bob Miller Group. Instructionally, they have been involved 1,000%, and they will continue with us. So, James, I think we can go to some of the pictures anyway. Groundbreaking started in the spring, and there's nothing like the excitement of an excavator in place. The interesting thing, though, is for people that were naive about the site that we selected, the engineering job that Bob Caffarelli, in consultation with the town engineer department, Lynn Cooper, everybody else involved, I mean, this is quite a venture. And we can go. Thanks. It's a steel constructed building, steel roof and sides. The importance of this is the fact that it's pretty much bulletproof. If you saw the foundation work, I know this is exciting stuff, but the foundation, we could put the whole town on this building. It will not go anywhere. And should there be a hurricane, I think we're ready for that as well. Okay? In the interior, more excitement, big empty space, but currently we house a pretty tired fleet of gas-powered golf carts that are going to be replaced by state-of-the-art electric carts. This facility will house a fleet of generally around 80. We can expand that number as needed. For once, if you had the conundrum of building a garage that was too small the day you moved in to your house, this has been built with an eye on the future, and we will have some additional expandable space. Thanks. This is the exterior. We tried to keep it in concert with the existing clubhouse, kind of Cape Cod-y. We included a few windows along with the window treatments and the shutters, and this will be completely landscaped. It's a plan that was approved by town, and it's quite extensive. In these diagrams, it's kind of hard to maybe muddy through it, but in part two, James, there'll be ornamentals that are in and around the building. There'll be a reconfiguration around the clubhouse. Will mitigate some of the traffic patterns that have created some congestion in the past, and overall it'll be a much safer venue for everybody. Okay? It's going slow. Okay. And more excitement. This is a rough-in, actually, people, of redirection of golf carts at the end of the 18 holes. They'll come up to the back of the parking lot, and it doesn't look like much now, but this is going to be a great efficiency for Roman and his staff, plus a convenience for the golfers that are going directly to the parking lot. And finally, just to highlight a couple of the director's comments, Roman Greer and his staff, once again delivered an exceptional product to the general public, emphasizing customer service in concert with the town administrator as far as the project in progress. Our big obstacle right now is dealing with Eversource, and again, I have my fingers crossed that we're going to reach some kind of conclusion there so that we can get into the electrification of the building. Another important, I think, adjunct to the business aspect of our operations is in any good business, exit outcomes as far as customer satisfaction is concerned is paramount. And once again, we rated extremely high as far as customer satisfaction is concerned. Everybody likes money, and the town deserves this as well. Unlike a lot of golf operations, I think nationally, and you may hear the negativity about it, we are far in excess of positives. We have revenue increases almost in every category, and in dollars and cents, at $1,856,000, up 4% over FY17. I think that's noteworthy. And continuing, another, I think, important component that Roman has brought to the table is our marketing of the golf course. It's a very competitive environment here on the Cape, but it's been hugely successful. And I think that in and of itself has, especially with the social media involvement, has really contributed to that success. In fact, today, if you remember yesterday, was anybody out playing golf yesterday? A little bit rainy, a little bit windy. Over at the Captain's Complex, and it'll be in the papers tomorrow, it's really an exciting kind of dimension of what's going on with golf on the Cape. The New England Intercollegiate Championship was held there yesterday and today, and came to a conclusion. It involves schools like Bates, as far away as Maine. I talked to people who are staying in Hyannis and in the area, hugely successful. And those are the kind of young people that we hope come back to our community as well. It was well attended and very well run. So in conclusion, I just want to mention, it's a partnership really with the selectmen, the golf committee, and the other departments within the town. And just recently, as a footnote, the liaison to the finance committee, I sat down with Roman and myself, Mr. Chorney. John, thank you. And it's evidence of that kind of cooperation. And we gave him an insight to how our operation has moved forward, and we look forward to next year's opening of our new facilities. So if you get a chance, stop up, take a look. Anyone?
That's great, thank you very much.
Okay.
Anyone have any questions?
No, just thank you, Clem.
Just a comment. It's
Yes.
great to see the membership increase.
Yes.
Every third year in a row, because for a while
Yeah.
it's been decreasing every year, and so.
Exactly. It's
That's even better news than the revenues going up, that you're getting the.
yeah. When you look at the aspect of involvement with not just the people within the town, but the success of attracting business from outside of the town as well, it's been a win-win, and especially in the junior involvement, Larry. School kids, as far as the programs, the junior league that Roman's promoted, it's been a nice gateway, to membership.
If I may,
Yeah, go ahead.
you didn't mention solar panels.
I
What's
think I mentioned it briefly, but yes,
okay, I
that's
missed that.
that's contingent with our
That's the Eversource discussion?
that's our debate with Eversource. So if anybody knows anybody, put a good word in for us, please, because that's paramount. I mean, that has to happen first so that all these other things can be initiated.
So, yeah, we should try to find out if there's any resource that we can offer up to help with that process. And also, congratulations on getting the women's junior championship, league for next year.
Oh, thanks, yeah.
That's
yeah.
great.
Yeah, that's great. The women's and the boys, and it's consistent with our, outreach to promoting junior golf, and because that's the future for the town.
Yeah, that's excellent. Great, thank you very much. We appreciate all you do. Oh, sorry, Chris, you had something?
I just, in terms of Eversource, we thought we had worked out a solution informally, and then they kind of didn't stick up with that. So we have engaged legal counsel just to kind of help us in terms of that. In terms of the process and the job overall, we're going to get the building up first. The solar panels obviously have to have the building to put them on. So we're going to do landscaping and solar as kind of phase 2 and phase 3. So they are very much in the process, and we do have a current cart bid for the gas carts. So we're going to transition that to the electric ones too. So we are trying to sequence this. It's going a little bit slower than we had anticipated, but it is still making progress.
Thank you, Chris. Thank you, Clem.
Thank you,
Appreciate
people.
it. Recreation and Youth Commission?
Good evening, John Mahan, Chairman of the Rec and Youth Commission. I believe you have a copy of our report.
We do.
Happy to announce we have a full commission. All the members have been sworn in. They're all up to date on their ethics, and the minutes and agendas are being posted as requested. Overall, 2018 was another very positive year, both programs and in beach visits. The weather was obviously part of that, but got to commend Eric and his staff. They're always opening up new programs, and people are taking advantage. Couple of things that were completed this year, I'm sure everybody saw, Red River Beach is no longer full of potholes, and the walkers are loving it. So that is done. The new irrigation at White House Field, which was a CPC project, was completed last month. So that is shut down now until the spring so that grass can regrow and whatnot. The new bathroom at Brooks Park over by the pavilion is hoped to be going in shortly. That's another CPC project. We're going out for an RFP for the lights at Brooks Park, which is all part of the Brooks Park Improvement Project. And Bank Street paving, Bank Street parking lot is on the list for this year for paving.
Right.
So, as usual, the town is investing in its facilities. I don't know if you paid attention or have able to come down Oak Street, Memorial Day weekend, one tournament in the middle of the summer, and then Columbus Day weekend. I've never seen so many people between McPhee, the high school fields, and the fields behind the community center. It looked like town meeting. And I went out a couple times for lunch or breakfast, and those people were out. They were at restaurants, so it's good to see. The fields are fantastic. As always, I have to give my kudos to the highway department. Beaches, parks, squares, everything always looks fantastic. And last but not least, thank you to the town, the taxpayers, the Board of Selectmen, and CPC for supporting us.
Great, thank you very
Thank you.
much, John. Excellent. Anyone have any questions, comments? Michael?
Just one comment, John, you might want to check the irrigation. It was very much running yesterday at 2 o'clock.
How do you know that?
Might be a little
I
chilly.
walked my dogs down to Potter's yesterday from out front, and it was very much running.
Thank you, Mike.
They played in it, they enjoyed it.
Sure they did.
And did you have anything? Don, you good?
No, thank you.
Okay, thanks a lot, John.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. Okay, the Housing Committee? Good evening, Art.
Good evening, Madam Chairman, members of the board. Thank you. It's great to be last. I don't know how I can top those. I tell you, that was great. I was spellbound by the golf committee. Anyways, Harwich Housing Committee 2018 annual report. During the year, the Housing Committee gained 2 new members, Joe McFarland and Megan Patterson, giving us a full committee of 5 members, and I thank the interviewing committee for that, and it's been a long time coming. All members have completed the Conflict of Interest Law course and have received a certificate of completion, and all members have been sworn in. New members were voted on for the present year, with myself, Arthur Bowden, remaining as chairman, and Megan Patterson as secretary. We hold monthly meetings with the exception of July and August, and we submit and post agendas and minutes of each meeting. Continue on. 6 affordable Habitat for Humanity homes are planned for construction in West Harwich. And with Community Preservation Committee funding, was approved for the infrastructure of that project. At the annual town meeting, voters approved the Affordable Housing Trust. And this is where we get to the meat of the thing. CPC funds were approved to fund the trust, which will be the vehicle that will drive housing efforts, including funding to hire a housing coordinator going forward. Housing committee members have participated in many housing educational programs during the year, and the list includes the 2018 Cape Cod Housing Institute presented by the Community Development Partnership and the Housing Assistance Corporation. It is a 6-week course held at the held for the Lower Cape communities at the Harwich Cultural Center. Another use for the Cultural Center. I want to deviate for a moment here. This course, for anyone that's not attending, is really missing something. Chris Clark, Charlene is there, myself, and a couple of my members are there, and it's an extremely excellent course this year. Not to say that the ones in the past weren't good, but this is really good. Additionally, Cape Cod Housing Institute peer group meetings. We have a representative membership in the Barnstable County Home Consortium, and visits to Lower Cape Housing Committee housing committees meetings, including Orleans, Brewster, and Chatham, to learn firsthand what other housing committees are doing. Going to deviate from here. I myself have been attending some of these meetings, and it's interesting to find out what other housing committees are doing in the area. I mean, they do a lot more, and they have a lot more responsibility than we have here in Harwich, but that's what the way it's been set up. The 2018 housing efforts have been a community effort, with the Housing Committee taking part in what will be a productive future for housing in Harwich. I firmly believe this. I think going forward, we got the wind to our back now, and I think we got money, we got land, we got membership, and there shouldn't be anything really in our way. All in all, it was a good year for housing. A list of the members on the team includes the Board of Selectmen, the Planning Department, obviously the Community Preservation Committee, Housing Committee, and the Housing Authority. Respectfully submitted, Arthur F. Bowden, Housing Committee Chair.
Thank you very
questions?
much, Art. Anyone have any questions, comments?
Nice job.
Thank you, Art.
Thank you.
Thank
Oh,
you.
Don,
Yeah,
hold on.
For just 1 second, Art.
Sure.
Well, first, thank you for what you're doing, but secondly, so that there's no confusion, Joe's dad is on the planning board. It's Joseph McParlin Jr.
Oh, I know that.
And now we all know it.
And now we all know. Okay, yeah, I'm sorry, I left that off. I'll take that hit. Thank you.
Thank you, Art. Thanks for your report. We appreciate it. Okay, on to our joint meeting with the Monomoy Regional School District Finance Committee and Capital Outlay Committee. And do you have to call your meeting to order?
With your permission.
Yes, please.
Call the meeting to order. We have 6 of our 9 members here. Angela Mantia, put your hand up. Angelo. Dan Torek. Mark Amarez, over here. John Chory. Tom Cherry, I thought I saw him there. And I'm Jack Brown. Dana DaCosta is running late. Lori Cabessi and Bonnie could not make it tonight. So we have a quorum, and I'll take us out of that later on and go home.
Thank you very much.
Is that a promise?
8:09.
Okay, so, Scott, do you want to come up?
Take the hot seat.
Yeah. I'll join you. Good evening. Yeah. Did you want to go ahead, Scott? and-
Sure. I know one of the things that each year the board's interested in is enrollment, and just to, I guess, remind the board on the process for school districts getting enrollment information. October 1st every year, school districts report back to the state the enrollment that they have in their schools for the year. So there's the annual October 1 numbers. And then usually a couple months from now, when I come before this board and also the Chatham boards, I'll bring with us what's called a school attending children report, because that's when we will start hearing back through the state of where Harwich and Chatham children are that aren't in Monomoy. So, so we can account for everybody that's in Monomoy, and we know where all the school choice students that are attending our school are and what districts or what towns they're from. So that gets reported out in October, but there's a lag of about a month and a half before that information comes back for us to report back and sort of break out the details of how many students from Chatham or Harwich might be at Sturgis or Lighthouse, or how many are at Nauset or TY. So that piece on enrollment is yet to come. What I gave you is the same information that Katie and I had shared last week when we went to Chatham, and I can share some of the good good news of the district that you see on this. So what we have is the green left-hand side is last year's enrollment by grade level, breaks it out how many students were from Harwich, how many from Chatham, how many from Choice. And the right-hand side, the orange side, is this year's enrollment data. The one thing that we track, and this is something I've explained to the board each year, is we track what happens to a cohort between 5th grade and 6th grade, because that's really the first time that children here start to have choice options. So we historically see some children heading off to Nauset or potentially DY, but also that's when the charter school that exists in East Harwich, you'll find children leaving for the charter school. So the two numbers that I told them to look at is, if you look on the green in 2018 and look at grades 5, there were 44 students from Chatham in the Monomoy Regional Schools, 121 students from Harwich in the Monomoy Regional Schools, 165 students. And then we follow that cohort. So that was our bubble year. That was our biggest cohort of students, and we had to add a teacher in 5th grade at the middle school last year because this bubble from both Harwich and Chatham was hitting the middle school. Now that bubble's moved up to 6th grade. So if we follow that same cohort this year in 6th grade, there's 42 students from Chatham, 117 students from Harwich. So we've seen a net change of 4 students exiting the district. Now, I'd prefer us not to see any students exiting the district, but 4 students is 3% of the total. There was 2 students from, there were 6 students that exited the district. 2 students from Chatham, 4 students from Harwich, 3% of the total students last year in 5th grade left us as they transitioned from 5th to 6th. One of the things that that I had stressed as we were forming the district is, if we want to go and see Monomoy retain its students, let's build a better middle school. Let's really enhance that middle school program, because oftentimes families, when they leave us in middle school, we don't see them come back. So to put the loss of 3% of the student population, or those 6 students, into comparison, if I look back historically when the district was coming together in the years FY10 through FY14, on average, Harwich alone was losing 6.8 students a year on average to Lighthouse in that transition, and another 4.6 to Nauset in that transition from 5th to 6th. Harwich was seeing 14% of its students leave in that time frame. We're down to 3% of the students leaving between 5th and 6th grade. So we're seeing lots of things improving on that end in terms of students staying with us. One of the reasons for that is, and I shared this at last week's school committee meeting, or 2 weeks ago when we had a school committee meeting. The state has come out with a new accountability rating for schools. And at the present, if you take, there's various forms of middle schools, there are junior highs and where you find your middle school students across the Cape. But if you take schools that have 7th graders at them, we are the only school district on Cape Cod that meets expectations, which is the highest rating that the state now gives middle schools. We have a higher rating for our 7th grade building, our middle school, than Lighthouse Charter School. We have a higher rating than Nauset Middle School. So that's really a signal to families that that the school district that we put together and the option of where their kids could be. This is, we've got a great school. Just another point of information, Harwich Elementary School also has that meeting expectation highest rating as well. So, so 2 of our 4 schools now have that. Under the state's old accountability system, those would be level 1 schools, and Monomoy and nor Harwich nor Chatham, didn't have level 1 schools. We're now seeing our school district hit this this level of accountability. So so glad to see that. Other things just of note here. Just bring your attention to the number of kindergartners at Harwich Elementary this year. There was a fairly large bubble of kindergartners last year at Harwich Elementary School. We had 102 kindergartners. This year, we've seen that drop off. It's a 1 year, it's a 1 year blip. We can't tell if it's a, 1 year is not enough to go and say it's a trend, but it's something to keep our eye on. If we see see a number close to 79 as we look forward, I think that's where we have to say as a school district and as towns, what can we do to go and help young families see our community as being a viable, affordable place to live. And that became one of the big conversations that we were having at our meeting last week with Chatham. Chatham over the last 2 years has had a fairly steady kindergarten population. There was 28 kindergartners last year, 27 kindergartners this year in terms of kids in Chatham. But we've seen at least for this 1 year a drop off there in kindergarten. The last place that we typically as a school district see a loss of students is the transition from 8th grade to 9th grade. And that is when students have options for Sturgis Charter School. Some students will go and elect for Nauset or DY at that time. And then many students will elect and head to Cape Tech, and which is a great option for some students and some families. Again, we see 3% of our students leaving in that transition, and again, it's down significantly. I was having a conversation with Chris earlier. I'm a little concerned that we're not seeing enough of our students choose something like an opportunity like Cape Tech, because the net loss there is a net loss of 4 students, and we're actually seeing some students who are out at DY or at Nauset coming back, or from Sturgis coming back. So I mean, the nice thing is we're seeing some students that were out coming back. We're still sending off around 15 or so students a year to Cape Tech, but we also want to keep in mind that number needs to be up in that 15, 20, so that we've got a vibrant workforce in those sectors of our local economy as we look into the future too. Other little things on enrollment that don't show up here, that just to dovetail conversations that we had last week in Chatham, and that I also had about 3 weeks ago at a community forum, is just some of the demographic changes that are happening within our 2 communities. If we go back 2 decades and look at at some of the demographics for Harwich. At Harwich Elementary School, had 2 decades ago no English language learners, or at least none that were showing up in the census that the state has, and there were 17% of the students were students with disabilities. Leap forward a decade from 1998 to 2008, the English language learner group at Harwich Elementary is now only about 2%, but we've gone from sort of negligible to 2%. The students with disabilities, 16.9%, so hovering there, at the same area. The state starts to track at that time students that are on free and reduced lunch, so families with economic need, and has that number listed at 16.6%. Leap forward to today. Our English language learner population at Harwich Elementary School is roughly where it has been for the past decade, so we're still hovering at 2%. What's changed in the last 5 years is the number of different languages that are showing up within that 2%. In the last 5 years, we've gone from 8 languages that the kids are coming in with to 11 different languages. So a third of the kids that are coming in that are English language learners, and I believe there's 27 of them at present at Harwich Elementary School. A third of them are Portuguese speaking, Brazilian, but we have languages that are showing up from most continents throughout the world. What also is changing is that the number of students that are economically challenged has gone from that 16.6% a decade ago to almost 30% now, 28.9% at Harwich Elementary School. So there are families that are struggling either annually or seasonally that we need to be aware of. In terms of students that have IEPs or educational disabilities, we've actually seen since Monomoy's come together, that number is actually starting to tick down, and I think that's sort of attributable not necessarily to there's fewer students with disabilities, but I think more students are having their needs met within the classrooms that we have and the courses that we've had. So we've seen that number dip down a little bit to 12% of the student population at Harwich Elementary. So some changes that are going on, but also some particularly at the middle school, some things that we could all be proud about.
Thank you, Scott. Any questions from members of the board? Larry?
Just some clarifications. Thank you, Kate and Scott, for the report. Just looking at the table, these will be simple questions. It's not a test. Thinking of school, but you list Harwich residents as a Chatham Elementary. Is that like almost an internal school choice going from Harwich to?
Right. So we call it intra-district choice. So there is what we've tried to use is school choice as a mechanism lately to balance class sizes between the elementary schools at Harwich Elementary and Chatham Elementary. So we sort of look at that magic number of how many Harwich students are coming into that kindergarten cohort and how many Chatham students that are coming into that kindergarten cohort, and try to figure out what will get us a fairly similar class size between those two
So this is
kindergarten cohorts.
a continuing effort to try to promote the movement over to make.
It's actually interesting, and this was part of the conversation at Chatham Elementary. I think there's a want by many in Chatham, although not all, to see a big push to see. It would really take about 18 Harwich families to voluntarily head to Chatham Elementary to see us need to add another classroom of students at Chatham Elementary. So at the moment, we've shrunk Chatham Elementary down to 2 sections of kindergarten for the last 2 years. And what we've what we did 2 years ago, and it was really where the families were choosing to go. More Harwich families were staying at home at Harwich Elementary School, and so we brought a kindergarten teacher from Chatham Elementary over to Harwich Elementary. So we have a nice stable state of 8 kindergarten sections each year, and the question is, where is it? Is it 3 and 5, or is it 2 and 6? And we've been running at 2 sections at Chatham Elementary, 6 at Harwich Elementary. So if we had a classroom's worth of children that live in Harwich volunteer to go to Chatham Elementary, we could have 3 sections there, but then we would pull a teacher over to, again, keep the class sizes the same. And again, I've shared this with my own committee. It fiscally really doesn't make sense for us to bring in students from choice outside to fill a classroom. The financial cost to the taxpayers is more than the $5,000 a year that you'd be bringing in. So, yeah, so when the district, when I first came here, we had 9 sections of kindergarten going on in the district, and we would have conversations about, are we sort of inflating the number of kindergartners carrying in our school at what cost? And so if you're carrying a full-time teacher's worth of choice students, you're likely creating a cost there between that salary, a teaching assistant, benefits, retirement. There's so we're trying to be fiscally sensitive to that.
Pre-K, what's that entail?
Pre-K, school districts.
I ask this because I always have a question about them.
Yeah.
Do we need to have more pre-K?
No, it's good. So pre-K, we'll go on what the school side of it is, and then I can briefly bring the board up to speed on. It became the bulk of our conversation in Chatham last week, and I'll explain why. But school districts are legally required to offer pre-K services for children. And what they do is they do what's called a peer model preschool. And so there are students that live in our communities of preschool age with special ed needs. And the school district is mandated, legally obligated to provide them preschool supports. But the model that's used at Monomoy and statewide is to have students without special needs mixed in with the students with special needs, so that they're learning from peers and helping all of the students at that in our preschool be better ready for kindergarten a year or two later. The challenge for many of our families, both in Chatham and Harwich, is that the school offers a half-day preschool experience. For a working family, and I can speak, when my kids were growing up, both parents worked full-time. A half-day preschool wasn't something that we could exercise as an option. And what we're finding is that more and more of our families in both Chatham and Harwich have preschool needs that aren't something that fits into that district model. We're also finding in both Harwich and Chatham is that the number of preschools have been closing. So we've been losing preschools in both of our towns faster than options have been opening up. We last year had conversations with Cape Cod Child Development, and I had shared these with both Chris and my board. We have some spaces with the contraction of kindergarten classrooms at Chatham Elementary School. We have some spaces opened up, and I've been exploring, can we find some area partner that could provide full day, full year preschool opportunities in those classroom spaces to provide a service to our families in our two towns. And we'll continue to explore that, because when we started to have conversations with all of the different preschool providers in Harwich and Chatham and the area, the waiting, there's 30-some families on waiting lists in Harwich for preschools, and that was before, I think there were 2 more preschools that had closed. So, so it's a need, and that was one of the big conversations that was happening last week when we were before the Select Board and the Finance Committee there, is how do we support young families? And I think they were really recognizing in Chatham that preschool is a big issue for families, and it's potentially one of those areas where a town can make headway or put in programs that may further attract young families to the area.
Just one last question. When you talk about the 11 different languages, what's the entry levels on that? Do they come in at, is it all grades, or there's predominance in one grade over the other? I think just put the strain to put on your teachers.
They come in at all grade levels. At present in the school district, about 9% of our student body gets ELL services of some sort. So this is, your English language learner services are, if your ability to use the English language gets in the way of your ability to access the rest of the curriculum, the school district needs to provide services. And again, this was something I shared at this community forum 3 weeks ago. That number for our school districts, if we go back 20 years, was almost nil. And we've seen that go from 0 to 5, 10 years later, and from 5 almost to 10%. So the population's growing rapidly. At the elementary level, it's growing more rapidly in Chatham than it is in Harwich. But that number continues to increase each year, and those are services. I think Katie and I, in our when we go back over the last 5 years, I think almost every other year that we've been here, we've talked about, well, we might need to add a staff person to provide English language learner services at this grade level or that grade level. That's been one of the shifts that's been in our little budget staffing conversations over the last years.
Thank you, Larry. Michael? Ed?
In your conversation over pre-K or care services, I know Falmouth has had similar issues also, and they've reached out to YMCA down that way, who have started. I know there is an interest in the YMCA is investigating providing services out this way. It might be a good partner to look at.
And I know that Cape Tech had an early childhood program that as they were sort of reconfiguring their program, they sort of shut down their early childhood program, but had space, and the Y has recently taken over this year that space. I know we have on our docket to go over, Katie and I and the elementary principals, to go see that program in action and look at whether that's a partner that we'd want to look at bringing in. Because again, I'd rather not see us have empty classrooms, knowing that there's a need, and I just want to be clear that if we can provide early childhood opportunities, it's like preschool makes kids better ready for kindergarten. Kindergarten makes kids better ready for first grade. It makes a lot of sense from a school district standpoint to use available space that we might have in our buildings to do that. And preschool, we don't have enough space in our buildings to deal with the challenge that I think's out there in our 2 towns for our families. There are more families in need than we have space to go and address on the preschool end.
Thank you. Don?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just by way of clarification for something that Larry brought up originally, as I understood it from last year, that to the extent that there is intra-district choicing going on, that the model would be that essentially you would like to start at kindergarten with an entire classroom size entering at that point. Would that be correct, or as opposed to adding like 5 into the second grade?
Yeah, it's ideal that you have students join you as early on. At the end of the day, as a school district, you're rating, you're responsible for how the student's doing on an MCAS test. And so ideally, if seeing that student successfully graduate is what you want to do, the earlier they come in the door, the more that we can be the ones making sure that they're heading in the appropriate direction. At the high school, what we've been doing is trying to ensure that we take in students primarily in 8th grade, because at the end of the day, we're responsible for the student passing a 10th grade exam. And you can imagine having a student join us just in 10th grade doesn't give us a lot of opportunity to go and have influence on what's happening in that 10th grade exam when it's testing, their accumulation of knowledge from, kindergarten up through 10th grade.
Well, the reason I brought up that is because that's the unique, the focus here, that's a unique portion of the district, is that it was formed with 2 towns having their own elementary schools. So over the course of the formation of the district, there hasn't been any kind of robust movement from Chatham, from Harwich to Chatham, like first, second, third, fourth.
No, in fact, what we've seen since the districts come together, more families from Harwich are staying at Harwich Elementary, in part because if you go back in time, there was almost 20% of Harwich's student population was heading to Chatham for different things that they saw Chatham might offer, and I think some of it might have been just a smaller, more intimate educational program that happened at the middle school and high school level. Well, it's the same program now, and the class sizes were smaller at Chatham Elementary School than Harwich Elementary School. Well, on my end, I'm trying to do everything I can to keep the class sizes the same, so there's no difference in class size, same curriculum, same middle school, same high school experience. So we're seeing the Harwich families are tending to stay at home, and that's where, while I think there are some in Chatham that would say, hey, it'd be nice if you could go and push another 18 students our direction. That's not, I can go and say, hey, you can tour Chatham Elementary School if you're interested. You're welcome to go. But what we have found in the last 2 years is we have had more interest at Harwich Elementary School, or at Chatham Elementary School, than we could support. And what I mean by that is, I think we had this past year maybe 7 families that were interested in Chatham Elementary School, but if I was to say yes to all 7 of those, the class size at Chatham Elementary School would have been much higher with 2 sections, and Harwich lower, and again, it wouldn't make sense. We're trying to keep the class sizes relatively the same, so so we had to go and say yes to 2 and no to the others, and hold like a little mini lottery.
I bring it up, not to belabor the point, because over the past year, the difference and the divide between what would seem to be boutique-y as opposed to being under-enrolled became a subject of concern last year, where we started talking about, well, not the class size, the school size. It became an impetus to start having a discussion about alternative models, like part of the elementary school being in one town, part of it in other grades being in the other town. I'm only pointing out that your one opportunity appears to be for people who haven't gotten enrolled in either school, where you have the opportunity to form a full classroom at the kindergarten level that just keeps growing up into the school.
And one of the other, at least, misconceptions that we, every time now when we go to Chatham, have to go and clarify is that in no way, shape, or form are we shutting Chatham Elementary School. It's, you know, there's 2 full classroom sections worth of children at Chatham Elementary School per grade level. There's just not a population of children to support a 3rd classroom at Chatham Elementary School, but there were some people that somehow their takeaway from those conversations last year is that, oh, we were going to close one of the elementary schools, and that's not the case.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So to follow up on that then, I just looking at 2018 in Chatham Elementary, and the total number was, 244. And then this year, it's 229, so it's down by 15, correct?
Right, and if you think about that, that's, so that's one less classroom of students. So
Yeah.
last year we had 2 kindergarten sections, now we have, and 3 sections of everything else. Now we have 2 kindergarten, 2 first grade. So, so that's us really restricting school choice at 2 grade levels, saying yes to many of those school choice families and say there is some room in the district. It just happens to be at Harwich Elementary, not at Chatham, not at Chatham Elementary, trying to keep class sizes roughly the same between those 2 buildings at each grade level.
And that's kind of different from last year,
Yeah,
right?
it's different than
Because
2 years ago.
2 years, sorry, 2 years, because it was the opposite.
Yeah, and when the district first formed, there was still the residual, a lot of Harwich families over at Chatham Elementary School, and that as that trend has shifted, I think the families have, as they've said, well, hey, we could go to Harwich Elementary and still get the same middle school, same high school, same curriculum. So we're trying to keep up with that sort of natural shift back.
Okay. And the other idea on that too was to try to encourage if you could get a partner like Cape Cod Child Development to do pre-K full day in
Right.
Chatham,
And
right?
that's something we'll continue to pursue.
Okay. Thank you. Any other questions, Jack?
John, do you have any questions?
I do not know.
Mark? Angelo? Dan? Tom? I have any at this time.
Thank you, Jack. Okay, we want to move on to the next portion. Chris?
Number 3 is just, I think the school will provide an update on the Harwich Elementary School lease. So do you want to
Is
comment
this
on
the amendment to the lease?
the amendment to the lease?
We were contacted by our insurance company when the lease agreement was set up between the 2 towns and the region. It indicated that the region would be getting the insurance and then billing the towns for the insurance for the town-owned buildings. But in practicality, the town of Harwich insures Harwich Elementary School, and the town of Chatham insures Chatham Elementary School as well as the middle school, and then the district insures the high school. So the insurance company has requested that the language in our lease reflects the practice that's always been in place since Monomoy came into existence. So what happens is every year, we get an invoice, Carol will generate an invoice on what the district's cost is to insure what the town's cost is to insure Harwich Elementary School, and then invoices us, and the same town of Chatham does the same thing. So what we presented is a draft amendment to the lease, which the school committee approved at our meeting last week. However, in the meantime, the council in Chatham tweaked it a little bit, not anything of substance, but just kind of did some tweaking of what the school committee voted on. So at this school committee meeting, we will be voting on an amended. So I think we should table any action with this board tonight, and then when we have the revised vote, we'll come back, or send it back through Chris. And it's just and we've heard from the insurance company asking us what the status of the change is. So they were pleased to hear that it was moving along in the process.
Okay, thank you. And then the next portion, in terms of the Finance Committee priorities, do you want to speak to that, Jack?
I don't know. Do I have a member here that can speak to this?
No,
Dana's not here.
right, so I'm gonna
So
hold
if we
off.
could defer that?
Sure.
Thank you.
And then the capital budget requests, if you want to speak to those, Scott? Katie? Or do you want to talk to them first, Chris, or do you, how do you want to do
You
it?
gonna do a capital budget overview for Monomoy?
I just had a couple of smaller items that we were talking about that may be needed at Harwich Elementary School, but
Yeah, I'll
Okay.
defer, and then
Sure, and then you
I have
go.
my
Okay.
overview that I like to do. Go ahead.
So when we're looking at the capital, we do have a 5-year plan that gets modified, and as everybody knows, you know, we plan, and then, you know, a storm comes along or whatever, that we have to make adjustments. Looking at FY '20, we don't envision any major capital improvements. There's a rooftop unit at Howard Elementary School that's above the library that is going to need to be replaced, which has a price tag of about $18,000. And it's really just some HVAC things over at Howard Elementary that we'll be looking at. And then a want, and I know capital, you know, there's a threshold, but then, but there's a want to replace the carpet in the activity room, that big, large room when you walk into the left. So those are some of the things that we're looking to do there. This past year, we went out to bid, and we have contracted with a company that does all of our preventive maintenance on the rooftop units, except for the high school at this time. We have a district plumber, we have a district electrician, and we've been really doing a lot of preventive maintenance on the boilers and on the rooftop units and the exhaust vents and everything. So, and we have a contract with a roofer as well that's been putting out, it's kind of like whack-a-mole where some of the leaks are. You know, we put out one and then it comes out somewhere else. But we originally came to this group 3 or 4 years ago saying that we thought possibly in 2020 we were going to be looking to 2 major roof projects. And we think at this point, based on the work that we've been able to do and the preventive maintenance as well as the repairs, that those big expenses are going to be out more from like 2023 and 2024. So I think that's good news for
That's
those
good.
2 large projects.
Okay,
So that's capital in a nutshell.
okay, great, thank you. Chris, do you want to?
Thank you. It is my hope that this year, as part of the capital outlay committee here, that Monomoy will submit your capital budget so I can have it at least as an addendum to the overall plan. I make that same request of Cape Tech, just to have with the law department. Thank you, Madam Chair. Just to do a little bit of an overview, it seems like we're in an overview night, so I'm going to keep this kind of high level, if that's okay. But just to look, we have received the requests. The material that you have, I think, is a pretty good indication of what's going to be discussed and focused on, if you would. Just kind of interesting looking at some of the numbers overall. I do break down and I've kept the form the same. I did receive a request from the committee this year and have decided to honor the request by kind of highlighting in a different color the items that are new to the list that hadn't been on, that all of a sudden have now become more of a priority. So you'll see that I will add that. You will also see under administration that there's still a lot of highlighted components. I am still working on it. To be perfectly honest, I think I have finally reached my saturation point. Buying a house and trying to be the administrator has just really taxed my capacity. But I will deliver on the timeline that I need to deliver on. But just to kind of say that, I was in Saturday to try to catch up on some of these things. But overall, for 2020, FY '20, the total amount of requests that are in are just shy of $12 million. One thing that seems to be kind of a trend that you'll see this year, that the DPW, there's a fair amount out of that number for roadway. As the board will recall, there was a holding off of the Lower County Road project. That by itself is $5.5 million, so a fairly significant amount of that money. But where we've had last year, I think 20 plus million for the sewer project, you can see where the number, 12 million in 20, 7 million in 21, and I believe that 22 will actually go down to about $4 million. And then only when we start to get into phase 3 of the sewer will you start to see that kind of creep up again. One of the things I did too, just on this form, that at the note section, I did total up over the 7 years what that looks like, for order of magnitude. So out of the 7 years, is about $100 million worth of requests. Water department, which is self-funded, is about $8 million. The wastewater is $20 million under this. The highway or DPW is $24 million. I would just say that number appears to be high, but just to remind folks that we do get $700,000 a year from Chapter 90 to help fund that. And then we also have in here, under 23, FY23, $5.6 million, which is TIP funded. So we are on the TIP list for 2023, and that is to do the West Harwich, the section of Route 28 in West Harwich. Just a few, most of these other ones are a little bit more on the smaller side, but just to highlight a few of the bigger projects. On the Harbor Master, there is still work needs to be done on some of the jetty work. We have done harbors. There are some jetties that are in need of some work. So that is a large portion on the harbors. And then under the fire department, $4.7 million in that. That is a good portion of that is made up really with 3 projects. One is the pumper truck replacement and the ladder truck replacement, and then the radio system are probably about 2/3 of that total cost. One thing that I am going to introduce this year with the willingness of my finance director, Carol, to work with, is I'd like to adopt the same philosophy that we've done on the roadways. Every year we ask the residents for about $700,000 in roadway. We try to finance that over 5 years, and we have that always revolve. So we spend a fairly consistent amount, $250,000 to $300,000, paying that off. So that number, even though it's $700,000, because we stretch it out over time, we're paying off a fairly consistent amount each year. What I'd like to do, and we would do this through the selection of a debt exclusion, to do a similar concept for potentially for the pumper truck and then the ladder truck, to see if we can take those 2 big ticket items and have that be kind of consistent, so we can borrow and instead of having a spike, then avoid the spike by having more consistent borrowing. So we will kind of go through that detail and see if that financially makes some sense to create some stability. We do know that big pieces of equipment at the fire department will have to be replaced. They are, every 5 to 7 years. I'm not talking about ambulances in this. Ambulances we will still try to fund out of free cash. But a ladder truck now, I mean, it's hard to believe that a piece of mobile equipment would be $1.4 million. But some of the cost of this equipment is just getting to a level of significance. And then really under facility maintenance is about $3.3 million worth of requests in there. One of the things in this area, as the presentation last week or the week before on the green communities, we do hope to offset some of those costs that we're going to be doing in this area through green communities money. So that is something that we had not or have not had in the past that ability to do, that now going in the future we will have the ability to have some of that green community money for energy efficiency concepts. A couple that I just want more so to have the selectmen just kind of start to think a little bit about under administration. And when this says administration, it's me doing the work, but I try to listen to the board to see what some of your priorities are and some of your thoughts are, and just some of the items on that. The first one is the Harwich Center ADA sidewalk project. That is to have ADA improvements made to the sidewalk network in Harwich Center. There is a grant request that we have already submitted for up to $250,000. So we do have that in there. The estimated cost for that work is close to $700,000 is the estimate, and we did receive an estimate on that. I did provide a placeholder for the Harwich Center initiative, so as they do their work, we can have a placeholder. Right now, it's to be determined. Albro House, I'd like to kind of float a concept. I did work on this on Saturday. We had $2,500 to look at that and see what the building needs to have done to it. And what I would like to propose is really two potential reuses of it. And not reuses, but one would be to keep it as light office and continue to do what we're doing there. And a renovation that would be geared around keeping it light office. And then I have to give Selectman McCaskill credit for this, because this was a good idea by him a couple years ago, that we are looking at, see, it goes both ways. In terms of, it is a house, it used to be a house, and he had brought up that why can't we consider that for affordable housing, maybe even veterans housing. So I think that's a great idea, and that's something that maybe we should explore, so to have an idea that, at least get this study done to see if we did want to convert it back into a house, what would go into that. It does have existing bathrooms. Last year, CPC funds were, or year before, CPC funds were used to make the first floor bathroom handicapped accessible. So there are some elements, but that would be a topic really for the selectmen to kind of decide what direction you'd like to go on. 203 Bank Street, this is another concept that I would like to also kind of float. Town meeting did vote to dispose of that property to a conservation group. So, and to that end, what I would like to see if the board would give some consideration to, I did research, we had about 550 pages done of studies on that for, not a brownfield, a 21E, the initials of a 21E for hazardous waste, and then also remediation of the building for pre-demolition. That cost, those two costs, came back at an estimated about $60,000, was to remove some of the asbestos in the building. That was about $35,000, and then $25,000 to have our DPW demolish it. With the idea or the concept of, came up at the, probably within the last 6 months, retain the parking field that currently exists, either try to see if someone wants to use that building or to demolish that building, to see if we can do that element, and then keep a section of the property that is closest to the Robert Smith conservation land, to see if that can then be sold off adjacent to it. It won't be as much money, I think, as town meeting was thinking when we did this originally, but it does go to keep to the intent of what town meeting was advised, that it would be, try to be sold off to a conservation purpose. I think the parking would need to be retained, or would be valuable to be retained, not just for the conservation, so if people wanted to do tours, but also if we had overflow parking, to give that parking committee that's been formed in Harwich Port to see if that has a viability to it. So I think to have potentially two uses of that site does render itself as a possibility. On the walkway reconstruction on Route 28 from Saquatucket to Harwich Port, this is supplemental at $450,000. The hope is, and we are going to check in, we do have a MassWorks grant. If we're able to get the MassWorks grant, town meeting approved $250,000 last year to do that sidewalk work, to connect Harwich Port to Saquatucket Harbor. So that concept is there. That, I have free cash on that, but I would like to see if that could be funded through the grant. And then the Bank Street, to connect Bank Street from here, from the center down to Route 28, that had been on the plan previously at $350,000. That does need to be adjusted up. That's an older number. And then really just a few smaller items, the insurance work to maintain the former West Harwich School. I think the West Harwich School had a discussion last week. What are we doing in that in the future? So that has to be determined. In the short term, we need to do some work just to maintain the insurance coverage for a vacant building. On the schoolhouse revision to the site plan, Schoolhouse Road. This is the expansion of the parking lot by where the Chamber of Commerce is. That hasn't gone away. It's just been continued to be worked on, so we will more formally submit that, or we're preparing that to be submitted. And then the preparation and utilization of Queen Anne Road Solar Farm expansion. That is also something that administration is working on. To do some initial clearing with the idea that that would be farmed out to a solar provider to do some of that work as well. And then the last item is just the green fuel efficient fleet replacement schedule. One thing I was surprised I didn't get asked last week is that we went from 7 vehicles to 9 vehicles, and I'm surprised no one picked up on that. The reason why we actually offered additional departments to see if they had kind of administrative vehicles that they could make use of green vehicles, and we did have a few additional takers. So this does have 9, so it's not just a town hall fleet, but a couple others. I think DPW and Public Safety were interested in having a few of their vehicles. So that details will be in there for future discussions.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Michael?
I picked up on it, but I wasn't here.
And then maybe one last thing, I'm sorry, on the, because I know it's a topic too, the pet burial ground. You know, I just want, that is something that we are looking at continuing to proceed forward. We do have an estimate for doing that, and that's something that, obviously, there's a little division on the board, so when there's division, I need to have majority to tell me what direction we're going to head in. But there is proposals in for that, for the out years for the pet crematory and the building, but to finish the pet burial ground is in the plan for FY '20.
Thank you, Chris.
Excuse me, Madam Chair.
Sure.
If I might add, and I neglected to mention one of the things on the horizon that everybody needs to be thinking about too is the other playgrounds at Harwich Elementary School as well as Chatham Elementary Schools. Both of them are in the process now of having reports done on, you know, the conditions of them, the needs of them, the ADA compliance of them. What we have has been maintained beautifully, but so that's a kind of a big ticket item. We may have pushed the roofs off, but the playground, and I know that there's a group that will be looking to come next year to use perhaps some community preservation funds to help with that whole area behind the basketball courts and everything behind the middle school.
Okay. Thank you. Okay, any other, Jeff?
I don't think there's anything further from my point of view.
Oh, sorry.
So I adjourn the meeting on our part.
Okay, thank you.
Can I ask you to meet downstairs in the library?
Hopefully you stick around just for a second.
Don?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I said this last year, I'm going to repeat it again. The purpose of a capital plan is not just for us to plan, but for taxpayers to plan on how they can pay for what we're borrowing for. We don't currently have a capital plan in that way. We have a capital budget. Things can move fluidly in any year because there isn't, you're not just adding one year. One thing that I would find really helpful, along with our cool charts, is to have one more cool chart. One that has from 19 out that shows retiring debt, and if we were to approve these other debt prospects, what that would look like on a bar graph. Because absent a real plan, that's the only thing that we've got. I mean, to be able to see visually that you're retiring an analogous debt to what you're assuming, and we could manage this thing, because nobody presupposed the kind of immense expenses we were going to be making on wastewater. So already that's kind of blown away what would have been a 5 or 10-year capital plan absent that. With coherently retiring school bonds or whatever. But that's not possible now, and I'd really like to be able to visually see those years, both going back 1 year and then going out.
Yeah, that's a great comment. There's a blank space, and I know Carol's been actually working pretty closely with me. We do hope to fill that blank space with a plan. One thing just on that, and just with the Capital Outlay Committee, when we show that, it would be my inclination to show, as you just indicated, Selectman Howell, that we show the debt that's being retiring and the debt's being added on. And I think anything that we're gonna pay from free cash or anything that we're gonna be able to do in-house, I don't think that I think it would be more confusing to people if we were to show the debt or the impact of those. So I was gonna show the large-scale debt and anything that gets paid by free cash, not show that? Or would the board like to see, again, I think this is confusing, because just as let's take for instance, if it was an ambulance, and it shows that the tax impact would be, whatever the number's gonna be on a house that's $350,000, but if you're paying for it from free cash, there is no tax impact that year. So I don't wanna confuse people by showing an artificially high level of taxation when it's not gonna exist. So whatever we pay with free cash, I was not gonna show on that chart. We obviously do show it in the plan exactly how much, and this plan does call for about $1.5 million of our free cash to be used to fund capital items. But just I'd like to
I'm
get
glad
the-
you brought that up, because I was also thinking of that we keep muddying the waters here with the baby capital plan and the real capital plan, because we're including under $50,000 items here. And you're not going to be using free cash in general to do a $2 or $3 million purchase.
All right.
So if we kept the graph that I'm talking about to over 50,000, and things that we would be likely to borrow from, because the reality is that even though you're talking about that as a possible exception to the rule, the reality is that we've got OPEB problems, we've talked about the wastewater not being fully funded for several years in, and we're going to have to do something to subsidize that. So I can conceive of our free cash freely going to some of those things, and it's not going to be really available for maybe an ambulance, yeah, but it's not going to be available for a lot of these things that are under $50,000, at least in the immediate future. So if we could keep those two things separate, even though you want to, because ultimately FinCom's going to be involved, but the Capital Outlay Committee isn't on the under $50,000 one. So it's confusing to me, never mind the public, to wind up just congealing them all into a giant piece of paper when they're not really all the same. The homeowners really want to know, are you going to really bust out and start borrowing for all kinds of big projects? And that's what the capital plan was supposed to be. So we can make the best of what we got.
Yeah, no, I'm happy to segment off the two. Just obviously, as the administrator, you pay me to maintain and keep sure that I'm up to date on OPEB and other costs, so I obviously do keep that into my.
Oh, I want to know about all of them, but I don't know that I want them all together.
We will show the debt, and the debt that we have shown includes, it's all inclusive, so it shows not only the Monomoy debt, it shows the anticipated debt for the Cape Tech School, and then sewer and everything else. It's all in. The reason for the document being kind of comprehensive is anything that comes up has to be paid for. So it has to be part of town meeting. So I do have a version that I did last year that is over 50,000 and is strictly capital only. And I did put this as an attachment at the back, just so people can tie out how the overall budget's being balanced.
Ed?
Yeah, well, I guess one of the points that Don brings up is in looking at our capital plan for the taxpayers having some way of anticipating it, and the goal of the capital outlay plan was to sort of maintain it at sort of a steady level, so you didn't have any one year huge spikes that people are scrambling to come up with an extra $500 to pay their tax bill. So, and one of the ways that in the past, many years ago, I tried to convince some members of the Board of Selectmen that might be a way to do that for many of the smaller types of expenditures that we have, but which can have in any 1 year cumulative effect, is by developing a capital stabilization program and fund, and so you can raise money at a steady level. Some of it in any 1 year may be used, some of it may get banked for those larger than normal but not insurmountable costs, like the pumper truck or the ladder truck, so you're not then waiting until you spend the money and have to finance it and pay interest. You're putting money away ahead of time, which apparently the general laws in the legislature really doesn't like for towns to do, but which is a common practice in many other states of having reserve funds that you can build up, so when expenses come due, you have money set aside for them.
We'll look at those options. There are some options available to us on that.
Okay. Michael?
I'm all set.
Larry? Jackie, you guys are, thank you, thanks.
Yep, thank you.
Happy trails.
Happy trails.
Okay.
You staying the whole meeting?
Oh,
That's right.
if I may, one last sort of capital issue. How's the concession stand and restroom facility? Is it finished yet?
Almost. I think Thursday night, we have a home football game that people will be able to freely use the bathrooms.
Really?
All right.
That's excellent.
There's still some tweaking that has to be done, but,
Okay, good.
That's great.
yeah.
Very good.
Yeah.
Congrats. It's a big undertaking.
Yeah, that and on Halloween, the high school construction project gets formally closed out by MSBA, so.
Is that interesting that it's
31st.
Halloween?
It's good.
Trick or treat?
Yeah, which treat?
It's a treat.
That's a treat for us.
Can you give them the recess bell?
I hope to attend the school building authority meeting and to be there when they finalize the program and thank them for their efforts. I think as a state organization, they've been a very good group to work with through the whole process, and I'd like to tell them that, so.
That's great, Ed. Thank you, and thanks for all your info tonight. Okay, on to contracts. Approval of agreement with CDM Smith, Inc. For Cold Brook Nitrogen Attenuation Project in the amount of $119,800. Authorize the town administrator to sign. We had this on last week, but we brought it back. Michael wasn't here. So, do you wanna?
I think they were.
I believe David Young is here.
David Young and Michael Locke were out.
Oh, maybe they're outside.
Yeah. You're on, boys.
Yeah, that's fine, David. Michael?
I guess the first question I have is for Chris. So this contract, why are we voting a $120,000 contract to be signed by the town administrator?
It's voted by the board, and then just to delegate me to sign it, that's all.
Okay. And I guess now my question, there was some clarifications in the packet, but I didn't really find them to be very detailed. So I guess it says exempt under contract on the procurement checklist. Why?
It is.
Why is that?
It's an engineering contract, so therefore it's exempt.
Okay.
And the reason for that is I do this every once in a while. The Colebrook study, which was specifically for nitrogen attenuation, we did a 2-year study, or was it a 3-year study? 2-year study to study the effects of how to reduce nitrogen. So it just makes sense to continue on with that project, and having CDM do all the legwork on that just made sense to continue on to have them finish this project and now implement what that study showed.
Okay. Technical team participation, $86,800. Where do we come up with that number? And I looked through all of the plans all the addendums that were put in the packet. One came up to 66,000, one came up, I can't figure out the math. Where do we come up with technical team participation?
Sure, I'd be happy to go through that. What you were probably referring to is we, under our contract, while you're signing a contract with CDM Smith, we have 2 sub-consultants who we've been requested to hire, who have been involved in the project all along. One is Brian House through SMAST, and one is Ed Eichner through TMDL Solutions. They both did the Mass Estuaries Project report on Saquatucket Harbor. Then they were sub-consultants to us for that 2-year study to further refine where the groundwater was coming into the site and what the nitrogen removal was. That 2-year study that the town funded. And then over the last year, we've been having meetings with Harwich Conservation Trust, the Department of Conservation Resources, and their design team to come up with the consensus plan that's been developed. So that 120, 66, 70,000, whatever the number was, is for those 2 sub-consultants under us.
So the 66,000 is 86,000 out of 66,000 goes to somebody else, not
Yes.
CDM Smith.
Yes.
And then the design review, I guess I understand that. So I guess I want to get to the heart of it. This project's changed quite a bit since it was voted by town meeting. And I think the public deserves an explanation, or should get an explanation, but I think since town meeting vote, it's been clearly defined that Harwich Conservation Trust is the owner of the project, and that it's changed a bit from what we originally voted, the design, or what we're doing for attenuation.
Well, if I might, the project hasn't really changed versus what was proposed at town meeting. This is as described in general in the Comprehensive Wastewater Management Plan. The details were always still to be worked out, and that's what's been worked out with the Harwich Conservation Trust, who is the owner of the site, which that's always been made clear. The town had an interest from the nitrogen perspective. Harwich Conservation Trust had a interest for trying to restore it back to its natural state. So we've been trying to mesh the two. We've visited the site that their design team has done up in Plymouth, and they're working on another similar project in Falmouth now. So I think what's reflected on the consensus plan is a plan that wasn't the original concept that was put forth, but after a year of these discussions amongst all the team members from the town and Harwich Conservation Trust, that it has morphed into this program that now meets the town's goals and the Harwich Conservation Trust goals. So it's actually a very good plan and still would fit within that umbrella of what was described at town meeting.
So it's different, but it achieves the same thing.
It's got the details that achieves what was presented.
Okay. Now, who's paying for what? Because now there's several different people in the flow chart here identified working on this project. So who else is paying or contributing to this, or is the town paying for all of it out of its $2 million?
You want to go through the?
Sure. So what Mr. McCaskill is referring to, that the audience here and the viewers cannot see, is what we have created in terms of an organizational structure chart, which identifies project funders or key stakeholders. Do you mind if I walk us through this so everybody understands?
Yes.
Okay. Which includes Harwich Conservation Trust, the state's Division of Ecological Restoration, the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, it's a federal agency, and the town of Harwich. Then there's a technical team which consists of representatives from those groups, as well as the hydroengineering design firm Interfluve, and Dave Young with CDM Smith, and the subcontractors, Brian Howes with School of Marine and Science Technology, and Ed Eichner with TMDL Solutions. Then we have the review team. Chris Clark has been present at the meetings to understand and help direct the town's interest in the design, ultimately leading to this consensus design at 50% completion that you see on your screen. Amy Uzowski, Town Conservation Administrator, Heinz Proft, the Department of Natural Resources, and we have two trustees with Harwich Conservation Trust, including the chair of the Land Stewardship Committee, Colin Leonard, and the president of Harwich Conservation Trust, Tom Evans. And then we have an additional Harwich Conservation Trust staff person, who is our Outreach and Stewardship Coordinator, Tyler Maycath. We have additional consultations with the Division of Marine Fisheries with the state. We've had Don Shaw, a wetland biologist, and we have room for other consultants as the design process continues to unfold and we move into permitting before implementation. So you asked about sources of funding. So we've got an overview of the organizational structure of this collaborative effort. Division of Ecological Restoration with the state has been contributing both staff time and actually direct funding for different parts of the design process, and also gathering baseline data that has been essentially influencing the design process.
U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service has also been contributing grants. Harwich Conservation Trust applied for and was approved by the Massachusetts Environmental Trust. That's a funding source that's sourced from the environmental license plates we see on some cars driving around town and elsewhere. $40,000 from the Mass Environmental Trust. So those are a few examples of the funding that we have been piecing together to move through the design process in an effort to continue funding the permitting and actually restoration construction through the implementation phase, post-permitting. We've also applied for, through the Division of Ecological Restoration with the state, for a National Coastal Wetlands Conservation Program grant. That has a maximum of $1 million. So combined with the town meeting voter-approved funds from May 2017, which, if I recall correctly, the article specified uses of those funds toward design, engineering, and implementation of the project. We're gradually pulling together the funding to continue moving the project forward into second 50% or final 50% design, then the permitting phase, which should take the next 9 to 12, possibly 15 months, and then into restoration, construction, the implementation phase.
Thank you, Michael. David, in one of these contracts, it says, I think in your contract, it says to represent the town's interest in review. And is there somebody on the other sides, I guess? I mean, I guess where I'm going with this is how much money are we going to spend on consulting and engineering, and how much back and forth are we going to do? You know, I'm a little concerned that we're not going out to bid for this, but I think you explained last meeting why we don't have to go out to bid for this. So that's my concern.
Yeah, I think in terms of this, this is actually kind of interesting. Interfloof has been the engineer that has done a tremendous amount of work already. So they most likely, and this is really a decision of the trust and the town, but more so the trust, if Interfloof is going to be the final design, and they're going to do the final design and the bid work, then it would be the construction company that would then come in and do the work. So Interfloof would be most likely paid more so by HCT funds in that effort. We may contribute some funds towards that only in terms of the design of the stream bed and the ponds that do nitrogen attenuation. And really, the bulk of the money, the $1.8 million that, or approximately a little over $1.8 million that would be left, would really serve two purposes for the town. One, we would actively participate in the construction dollars in a much more significant way to build the ponds and the stream beds, both of those being very high nitrogen attenuators. And then we are also committed to doing the monitoring over a long period of time to see how effective is marsh for taking out nitrogen, how effective are the stream beds for taking out nitrogen, and how effective are the ponds for taking out nitrogen. So we do have to have a robust monitoring plan, which is included in some of these numbers, to start to do that. So to make sure that we stay true to town meeting and that this is a nitrogen attenuation project, we would look at those elements. The material that we need to work out is, do we try to break out a contract where we take our components and try to pay for those, or do we say the overall project is, and I'm just making up numbers, 75% nitrogen attenuation, 25% restoration of the environment, and then we just pay that percentage. So the MOU that's discussed will kind of review some of those components, and we'll put that forth to the board. But having these environmentalists and the biologists kind of say what's what, and then the construction people, and we did talk already with the engineer, Interfloof, to find out what components are stream bed related and what components are pond related, and can you give us some kind of order of magnitude in terms of percentages so we can do an MOU. So that's kind of where we've progressed, probably to date.
That's it for this moment.
Okay. Larry, you have any questions?
Yeah, I do. As I've implied, Michael, I think the last time, I think you, Dave, as well, I've become rather skeptical of how this project's been going in the last several years. And partly maybe because I don't understand as well as I should. But we've talked in the past about interest in restoration and also nitrogen mitigation. And I find that, well, a couple things. It seems that it's become a debating society rather than moving towards a common end. I look at your record, and it is, I think you recorded, you made it 86 times or something and talked about this, which is interesting. You know, I mean, I know it's a complicated project, but, you know, that's really complicated if you have to have that many meetings. And then I looked just at the technical side of it, and initially the, you know, SMAS, their proposal was to have somewhat larger ponds and deeper ponds, because as Chris has stated, and I think you guys have stated, you know, the slower the flow, the more chance you have to spend in water, the more denitrification goes on. And so this consensus plan, all of a sudden we have smaller areas and much more shallow ponds. And so I don't see an indication from a modeling result that that's actually going to meet, in addition to restoration, meet the attenuation of removing the nitrogen from, you know, the current, the 2-year study you talked about, I think, was removing like 40% nitrogen. We want to get that up to 55%. And I'd be much happier with this contractor somewhere stated in here, because we state we're going to monitor it, we state all these items, but there's nowhere clearly stated that our goal is to remove that much nitrogen. So we have that going forward before we start, or to meet our monitoring goals. Right now, we're monitoring without any factual endpoint of what we're trying to reach. And so I'm not so happy with that, the way that's stated, and whether that's involved in the contract as a clear goal. Because just to say you're going to do the work and then monitor it, that leaves me without a clear response of, you know, what we promised the town, that we do not only restoration, but we would help them, you know, lower costs on the sewering. So that's where I am. I'm a little skeptical that we're getting to the end point. I understand the restoration part, but I don't want to give up the nitrogen mitigation as promised. And I don't see right now that we're getting there in a comfortable way. And in fact, we're in some ways we're repeating the work we did before. You know, now we're going to go back after the, I know I counted, and Chris corrects me the last time, but I think we've have 75,000 or some amount of money, and now we're going to spend another 100 and whatever Michael said, 100 and some, how much?
120.
120 to again look at design and going forward. So I don't see. I like a clarification. I like to feel more comfortable that we're moving forward in those projects. And quite frankly, I don't see it quite yet on this, on what you've presented me.
Go ahead, David.
The comprehensive wastewater management plan after the Mass Environmental, Mass Estuaries project was done, the MEP, that said that there was only 35% nitrogen occurring existing. We did the 2-year sampling program, which I think is what you were referring to. The town meeting had passed 2 years, $50,000 each, total of 100. That's where we now know where the nitrogen's coming in, where the groundwater's coming in. We have a better idea of the nitrogen removal. That consensus plan, there were several plans. I'm not sure I attended 86 meetings. I think it was only about 8 meetings. But that consensus plan has changed significantly. There were several plans to get to this one that had no ponds in it. Now you see the big blue ponds there. So that's come back into the consensus plan. Part of the design development now is to determine how deep they should be, what the best efficiency is for that, knowing that that sort of the elbow is where 60% of the groundwater enters that site.
Let me just get to the, let me finish that discussion then. Are you going to come up with a, as part of this project, will you bring back to us that the, you know, this is all based on modeling anyway. Initially, you know, I agree with your input and stuff. You're going to come back with us and say this removes the nitrogen that we've talked about, and that's what you, and that's going to be your goal when you monitor?
Our belief,
I mean, we need a front
representing
end
the
and then
town.
the back, and then the back end's fine.
Hold on, let him respond. He's trying to answer your question.
Our belief, the House, Eichner, CDM Smith team, has been that the ponds have a better history of removing nitrogen than the roughing system that has been done by Department of Ecological Restoration at some of the other ones. The good news is they both remove nitrogen. What that percent is at this site, we won't know until we get to the actual monitoring after it's built. So our goal is to try to use the history, the data we have at this site, the data we can find from other sites, and create the best design that we can. We think we want to exceed the 50% goal. And we think we may do that now because we've added the marsh restoration in the lower portion of the site, and marshland areas also remove nitrogen. That wasn't part of the original plan. So we've incorporated roughing for the first third, ponds in the second third, and now marshland system in the last third. So you've got 3 different systems, nitrogen removal, and the goal is to exceed 50%. We think we're going to do better than that. But we got to take it from the consensus plan now, which is a concept, and actually do the details and the design, finish the permitting aspect of it, and then construct it and monitor to make sure that that's being achieved.
Thank you, David. Larry, you have any additional questions?
No, I just want to, my final point would be, I want to be sure we're monitoring towards the goal. And I'd like that goal stated. Otherwise, why bother if you're just monitoring for monitoring's sake?
Michael, you?
I just had one follow-up on some math. Tech team part, Dave, in your contract, it's 86,800. The 2 companies that you mentioned that you're subcontracting is 51,360, leaving a difference of a little over 35,000. That's for you. That's for CDM Smith. What are we getting for that 35,000 other than the 18 meetings that are mentioned in this?
There are 4 tasks in our contract. The TMDL Solutions and SMAS folks are working on 3 of them, the meetings.
I'm only talking, just to clarify, if you don't mind, Madam Chair, just to clarify, I'm only on the 86,800. The technical team participation, the other 3 are little, and I do understand that. So the technical team participation is 86,800.
Yes.
If you go down in the contract.
Of that, the sub-consultant work is
54,000. Okay, this says task 1 costs 51,360. Maybe I'm missing something. But 51,360, 54,000. 18 meetings are mentioned in here, and there was a follow-up too.
Yeah, it's over a 3-year period.
3-year period. So 18 meetings. What else are we getting besides 18 meetings out of you for 35,000?
Well, those meetings, it's preparation. They send material out. We have to prepare and document. Then you attend the meetings, and then you do follow-up. So it's not just you're attending a 2-hour meeting type of thing. It's encompassed to be around covering 18 meetings. It's really going to be spread over a 36-month period. They wanted monthly meetings, but I said, I'm not budgeting for, at that rate, for 36 meetings.
Okay, lastly, staff will be available to attend those meetings at the same rates as the initial 18 meetings for the length of the contract. Does that mean anything over 18 meetings, getting to the point where we're trying to get to, both of these companies and you get to bill us more money?
We're not holding to the 18 meetings, but that's what it was budgeted around. I mean, if there's a 19th meeting and we have money left, we're not going to ask for more money. But if it starts running into 24, 25 meetings, then we may have to come back and say, it's exceeded, like I said, it's over a 36-month period. We may have to come back for more than that. I just wanted to put something that framed what that money was for.
Thank you.
Ed? Don?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm trying to take a more 1,000-foot view, looking down onto this. I've made some comments last week. What concerns me overall is, on the one hand, I mean, I've mentioned this before. I was a senior contracting officer in the federal government. I understand exempting from competition, but that's not the same as thou shalt not. Nobody tells you that you can't look anywhere else. They just exempt you from an obligation to look somewhere else. Now, CDM Smith was involved in the executive summary years ago in developing where nitrogen was. Would that be correct?
Yes.
Okay. CDM Smith has been advising us all along about pipes and the Harwich collaboration. Is that correct?
Correct.
CDM Smith is involved with the Tri-Town DHY, consulting for us with that possibility for the 3 towns getting together, which would result in, again, a sewage remediation plant.
That's correct.
Correct? And CDM Smith's involved with this. Now, the problem I have is if you're going to take the tack that you're exempt and you don't have to go anywhere, and this doesn't have any pipes on it. It doesn't have any plant that's going to reduce anything. We're getting to the point where anything that has to do with nitrogen or with sewage, it looks like in perpetuity we're going to be doing that. And until somebody can explain to me where the edges of this are, about what would trigger us taking a fresh look at somebody else doing something, it looks like you don't even need our approval. It's just always going to happen that we go in that direction. And I don't think that is fair to the taxpayers necessarily, because there's not much held in commonality with this particular project and the 2 other large-scale projects I just described, the Tri-Town one and the Chatham one. At what point do we just take another look? Never?
Go ahead, Chris.
Madam Chair, I did answer this, and I'll be consistent with my answer from last week. I think there's 2 things. One, yes, I understand the law says it's exempt. Why does the law say it's exempt for that service? The reason why the law says it's exempt is not just so we can do whatever we want. The purpose of the law saying that you can exempt something is that if you establish a relationship with a trusted consultant to bring you through a process, that instead of breaking in midstream and taking the work that was done in the study and having a new firm come in and want to change it, because I've done a lot of contracting over the years, and you bring a new firm in and they want to do things their own way, that we engage CDM to do the work, to do the feasibility study, and to have them help us to make sure that we're going to get the desired result that came out of that study. To Selectman Ballantyne's exact point, our goal is 50%, to go from 30 to 50. That's what's been driving me this whole time. And we have a consultant that says that if we follow this methodology, we should get to the desired result. Changing in midstream is not advisable in my opinion. With that being said, I have also had discussions, and I said this last week, we have a 40-year plan with 8 phases. It's been my recommendation that we go through phase 2, which is really the East Harwich sewering and this project, and then at certain points at the end of the phases, we look. Is the town happy with the services we've received? Is the town on the right track? And does it make sense at a natural break point to see if having competition for the service makes sense? So I've never said that I've hooked up with CDM for the next 40 years. But it does make sense that if CDM helped us start and get the comprehensive wastewater management plan adopted, that we stay with them through at least phase 2, and then we can take those logical points where it makes sense to see if we want to change. So for the next 2 or 3 years, we would probably be committed to CDM to finish the work in phase 2, and then if this board wants to look at or have competition for really phase 3, then we should have a discussion about that when we get to that appropriate point.
Right, and we did talk about that last week. We talked about the fact that switching engineers, in the middle of a project, just because we want to see what else is out there, doesn't necessarily mean that that's the best use of funds, because ultimately you're going to get a new engineer in here who's going to say they don't trust their topographical data, they don't trust all their other surveys, and they're going to go back and say to the town that they want to go back and do their own work. And in addition to the 18 meetings, that's standard. So, if you have an engineer that's gonna, file an NOI for you, you're gonna get in that proposal that they'll attend 1 or 2 meetings. You're gonna get that fit into that proposal of what those meetings will entail. Anything above and beyond that is gonna be an additional fee. And that's stated within the contract. So budgeting for 18 meetings versus, 27 or 30 is ultimately trying to keep the cost down with the hope that you're not gonna have all those additional meetings. If those additional meetings come up because regulatory authorities want them, then you're gonna have them, so.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I get that, although it was said at last meeting, but that doesn't necessarily mean it was all agreed upon at last meeting. I certainly.
No, I'm just saying that we
still
visited the
an outlier
subject,
here.
so.
First of all, I'm not impugning anything that CDM Smith is doing. I know what they're doing, and they do good work. My problem is that this seems like seamless. The logic that was just presented to me completely falls apart when you look at this, which is not located in East Harwich, does not have any pipes involved with it. It was the beginning of the second phase. It's in that second phase. So, and this is substantially different than it was last year. So how could we be any further away from another engineer looking at it than everything I just said? It's not part of the original phase. It's not in East Harwich, and it's not the same plan as last year. We're going to be looking at another 18 meetings.
But it is part of the process in which we're looking to, reduce the number of houses we need to sewer. So
but I'm with Larry
But they
on
are
this.
all tied together in the sense that you have an East Harwich process, you have a sewer process design, but ultimately, you're talking about reducing the number of properties that we have to sewer in town. That ties in to the overall project, as far as I can see.
It also ties in with always giving the same work of that genre to the same company forever. You've got to find a spot
I think that
where
Chris
you're
just
willing to
spoke
look at.
But I think Chris just spoke to the fact that we're talking about phase 1 and 2. If we jump around from engineer to engineer or different firms, not only are we elongating the process and possibly costing ourselves more money, no one's committing to CDM Smith for 40 years. I think that Chris just gave a good overlay of how we might go to the next section of the
I just want to support what Larry said originally. In my story, there's a beginning, a middle, and an end, and I don't see where the end is yet. I see a beginning and a middle.
Don't think you're gonna see an end immediately. It's a 40-year.
On this project.
So.
And I'm not suggesting we change anyone now. I want to continue this project. I'm looking at it two different ways. East Harwich going, that's one project. This is a separate project, even though it's tied into the CWMP. And this has started, we're already halfway through. I'm not suggesting we change. I just wanted a better definition that we get to an end of it that we're comfortable with. Because I'm starting to restate what I said before, right? And then we can go on to other items.
Okay, Michael?
Well, I just, for me, I see no end, and that's what my questions were related to. And thank you for the education and contracts. I'm quite familiar with them. 18 meetings with no provision to give back if it's done sooner, but there's a provision for adding to it. And I just see this as the same thing that Don just said. It's one thing after another. We started with a contract, and we don't have a project manager on this 40-year project. We don't have anyone looking at this. So these questions are reasonable questions. And I think that for the public are asking me these questions. How long are we going to go with it? And I don't think it's a reasonable answer to just say, well, they started with this, we'll go with it. We also didn't start with Harwich Conservation Trust right out of the gate as the owner of the project, at least that I remember. That was kind of dug into after the fact, and this subgroup was formed after the fact. Because when we went to town meeting, those other organizations were not involved, were they, Michael?
Well, if we're talking about the owner of the property, the Harwich Conservation Trust has been the owner of that property since 2001.
Right, that I know.
Yes, so that hasn't changed.
Yep.
And as the design process has evolved, we've brought on expertise that has been required along the way to advance to the consensus design at 50% that you see now.
All right, just so that we're clear, because David's shaking his head up and down, and Michael said we brought people in after the fact. We brought people in after the fact. A couple of these organizations in the large meeting that I attended in this room, when the stakeholders all got together, and it was a great meeting and everybody was in consensus, happened after town meeting, correct?
Yes, is that
Yes, I mean, so we started to bring in, and you guys came up with what you wanted, I'm gonna just say Harwich Conservation Trust. After town meeting voted the Coldbrook project and the CWMP, Harwich Conservation Trust had other ideas with what they wanted to do with the property outside of what the CWMP said, correct? On the restoration part.
No, I don't think it's after, I don't think it's the statement after the fact, in my view, construes that there was suddenly a switch in philosophy or direction. The goal of the Harwich Conservation Trust in this Coldbrook Ecological Restoration Project has included 3 objectives from the start. One is to enhance the diversity and quality of wildlife habitat. 2, to enhance water quality. 3, to enhance the visitor experience. Where there is a natural collaboration with the town is in objective number 2, enhancing water quality. Enter the town's interest of experiencing a co-benefit of this eco-restoration project of nitrogen attenuation or nitrogen reduction. Then the 2-year Coldbrook nitrogen attenuation feasibility study was approved by 2 separate town meetings. That was a town interest. Harwich Conservation Trust went cooperatively in that direction, always with the intention of achieving those other 2 objectives along with enhancing water quality. The May 2017 town meeting evolved out of the results of the Coldbrook nitrogen attenuation feasibility study, and that's where the objectives stated in that warrant article included funding design, engineering, and implementation of the project. We could revisit the actual language of that warrant article if that's helpful.
If I may. Thank you, I agree with you. And just to Chris, I guess. There's never been, are we saying now there's not a difference in what Harwich Conservation Trust envisioned for doing the attenuation and what our original plan was to do the attenuation? Because there was a bit of a struggle less than a year ago about how we were going to do this, correct?
Yeah, I think Michael said it best. I really do, in terms of what you witnessed when you came in onto that meeting is it's very traditional that you bring in regulators, you bring in other parties to make sure that we're all on the same page. So I think that we all had the concept of what we wanted to accomplish, but the details and form and function is where we had some disagreements. And it was working out those details and form and function that took an extended period. So this isn't a different concept. This is a concept that we're now making more concrete so we can go in and build it. And was it always perfectly aligned? No, there was a little bit of disagreement as we got to that point. But it's like making sausage, I guess. I mean, you're gonna have a few rough patches, but we're where we want to be, and we're accomplishing what the town meeting vote was, and I think what HCT as the property owner is looking to accomplish.
And I think that's the point of hashing it out till you get to the MOU, so that you can move forward. And my suggestion about the meetings isn't a lesson in contracts. I'm simply stating that when you're filing for these types of things and there are regulators involved, you may have to revisit certain issues multiple times so that those, estimated meetings grow. And maybe meetings within the various groups that lead to the additional meetings in front of the regulators or with the regulators. That's all I'm saying. So, to that point, this project, although it may not be the East Harwich Sewer Project, is related to the reducing in the whole overall process that we engaged in as a town, so. Is there any further discussion?
No.
Ed? Did you?
Yeah, well, on our agenda, the request for approval of the First Amendment to the lease agreement between the towns. No.
It's
no.
the
Approval,
contract A.
Approval of agreement with the CDM Smith for the Coldbrook Nitrogen Attenuation Project, the amount of $119,800, and and I'd move that we approve that and authorize the town administrator to sign.
Okay.
I would second it, but conditionally that, to be a dead horse, that the goals are clearly identified. So we do have a, we know what we're going, where we're going with this.
Okay, so.
How could you vote on something that hasn't happened?
Well, I think we vote contingent that the goal is to reduce the mitigate nitrogen, the 55% we talked about, that you guys have said this is doing.
So we can state that up in the preamble of the contract? Is that?
Yeah.
That
And
would
we'll do
it
it
for me.
consistent with the CWMP.
That would,
Right.
that would do it for me, because right now it just says we're going to do something and monitor it.
Yeah.
I find that difficult to,
I think that adds
follow
clarity. I
through.
think that adds clarity to it.
So
I don't have a.
we'll add that into the contract. So it's moved and seconded.
So that's added into the motion and
Right,
and
right.
you're
Yeah.
okay with
All
that?
of
I'm
that.
fine with
you
it.
okay
Second.
with that? I'll second that.
Right.
I just didn't, I would, I'd listened to Larry's discussion, and I agreed with it. I just didn't have the understanding of how to incorporate that into the motion, so I made the motion to force the issue. Larry to
So
come
is the
up with
motion
something.
clear to everybody? Okay, so moved and seconded. Any further discussion? All in favor? Aye. All opposed?
Aye.
3 to 2.
3 to 2. Okay. Approval of road salt contract for DPW.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Is Link, is he not here?
Lincoln's
Link,
here. for the
yeah, Link,
road
Regan.
fund.
Approval of the road salt contract for DPW. Link, thanks.
Thank you, Madam Chair. The town of Plymouth bids this on behalf of Barnstable and Plymouth counties every year. This is no different than they've done it every year for us for as long as I can recall. The price of salt did go up this year, $4.29. Eastern Minerals has typically been our low bidder. They're an excellent company to deal with. We had Morton Salt last year, and although the product was fine, so dealing with a much larger national company was kind of a hassle for the billing and so forth. And I'd be happy to answer any questions you may have about this.
Thank you, Link. Does anyone have any questions?
I
Larry?
don't, I would move, we award the fiscal year 19 road salt contract, amount of $54,000 per ton to be delivered to the Harwich DPW, and award is contract.
$54.
That'd be very
per-
expensive salt.
$54 per ton,
Consistent with the recommendation.
consistent with recommendation of the DPW director.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Michael?
So is the procurement process followed by the Plymouth on this, not the town of Harwich?
That's correct. I did email the administrator and his staff the entire contract per this provision. What happened to it, I don't know.
Just, is there a reason why, Chris, you didn't sign this contract? As chief procurement officer for the town?
This is actually above $45,000. So I think the total estimated amount based upon the tonnage. was
Yeah,
the threshold.
I
when
just- I only ask because contracts that come before us are supposed to be signed by Carol and chief procurement officer. I doubt we've discussed that.
Well, yeah, go ahead.
Madam Chair, I did meet with both Carol and Chris on this. It says 45 available. We ran a 3-year average, and that came out to $140,000, because you deficit spend under Chapter 44, Section 31D, I
can
believe.
sign it as procurement officer, page 2 of the form.
I'm looking at Carol's signature, but I'm not looking at.
I'm on the bottom of it, like page 2, Michael.
Okay, so.
Yeah.
Moved and seconded. Any further discussion? Don?
Yeah, I hope you don't have to use it.
Preaching to the choir.
Ed?
Well, being a California boy, I always remember one of the first odd road signs I saw. My wife and I were heading to New Bedford, and there was a sign on, is it Route 6 or Route 20, I forget what the route, 25, and it says you're entering a low salt use district. And I'm sitting there going, what sort of weird geriatric area have we stumbled into?
Hypertension.
Just one last
So,
comment. Chris, you did sign the procurement checklist on page 2, not the contract, just FYI.
Yeah, the contract's 120, so that's why you guys would sign it.
Okay, so moved and seconded. Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you, Link. Okay, on to new business. Request for approval of the First Amendment to the lease agreement between the towns of Harwich and Chatham and Monomoy Regional School
This
District.
is
We're gonna
the
hold
item
that,
to table.
sorry,
Yep.
right.
Yeah, let's table that.
And then approve Chapter 90 request per DPW to resurface various roads.
Thank you, Madam Chair. You have before you a request in the amount of $547,349 to resurface 5 roads in town, which were Doan, Earl, Neal, Cahoon, and the small one, Pilgrim. I need to apologize to the board for the tardiness of this request. Some paperwork got ahead of me, and unfortunately, I'm a little late getting to the board. If you see the correspondence, I talked to Mass DOT, and they have approved such requests in the past. So I'm hopeful that this will go through.
Thank you, Link. Don?
Madam Chair, I'd like to make a motion that we approve upon the recommendation of the DPW Director for Chapter 90 project requests for resurfacing roads in the amount of $547,349.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Did you say aye, John?
I made the motion.
Oh, sorry, right.
Nobody still gets to vote.
Even
He
I'm
still
not-
does get to vote. that's
Even I'm
right.
not that crazy.
Okay. So
Thank you.
approval of, thank you, Link, sorry. Approval of Bob Miller golf lease agreement. Authorize the chair to sign.
Yeah, if I could, and I appreciate that, the gentlemen have been here for a little bit. But
Yeah,
in
can we
terms
move-
of, yeah, this is actually a license agreement that was initially entered into, and only the Board of Selectmen can do license agreements. So you had brought before you 3 years ago, approximately 3 years ago, a license agreement to have golf lessons be taught up at Cranberry Valley. Roman Greer has been very happy with the services that have been provided, and the original license agreement called for a 3-year agreement with a opportunity for an extension of 2 years. So the recommendation before the board tonight is to extend to exercise the 2-year extension for FY19. The revenue for the town would be $5,788, and for FY20 would be $6,077. So this is below my threshold, but I am not, as town administrator, authorized to enter into license agreements. Only the Board of Selectmen can do that.
Thank you, Chris.
Madam Chair.
Don?
I'd like to make a motion that we approve the license agreement extension with Miller Golf for 2 years, as outlined by the town administrator.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you.
Thanks. Old business, I'll just make this short and sweet. Selectmen's goals and objectives. I didn't get any more, so I'm gonna just
I can
summarize
figure
and
out how to use
submit,
my,
so, okay.
iPad on the road.
Town administrators report, and can I ask one thing, Chris?
Real grind.
And if the board doesn't mind, because the gentlemen here are waiting on Selectmen's report under the Stone Horse property
Oh,
variance.
I'm sorry, I thought they were here for something else. My
Does
apologies.
the,
I'm happy taking it now.
okay, so if you
Yeah,
don't mind, we'll
absolutely.
take it out of
Sure.
order. And
Sure.
so this is on the agenda because we have a special project being proposed in town, and I had said it would be nice to be able to write a letter in support. Maybe you could give a brief overview so the whole board is informed.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you.
All right, so I'm Bill Riley. I'm representing Ron Rudnick and Trish Kennedy and Tom Kennedy, who are proposing this project. The concept is that there's a need for workforce housing all over Cape Cod, but in Harwich and Chatham and Dennis and as you may recall, we'd come to a department head meeting a year and a half ago or so and made a presentation. And after hearing from the fire department and their concerns and the requirement for sprinkling, and a further review of the condition of the structures on the property, it was uneconomic at that time. And so we talked with Outer Cape Health, which is the owner of the property, about restructuring, i.e. reducing the price. There was some resistance to that, so time passes. So the Kennedys and Outer Cape Health have now reached a price agreement that's acceptable. Ron has come up with a proposal to remove all the buildings on the property except the, what was the headquarters building, I suppose, the office building. Construct two buildings, each of which would accommodate 2 people to a room, 90 people in each building. The town of Harwich defines a dormitory in the zoning bylaw, but there's no provision in the zoning bylaw for dormitory use. So we wonder if something got lost somewhere. So that requires us, the previous project, we need a special permit from the zoning board of appeals. And, planning board approval and the like, all of which was very manageable. Because there is no dormitory use in your zoning bylaw, we have to request a use variance from the zoning board of appeals. And candidly, that's a difficult standard to meet. And so we felt that we'd already met with the department heads, and there seemed to be pretty universal approval from the department heads. Is the chief still here? Yeah, the chief is, thinks it's very, very important that we accomplish this goal. And so Mr. Rudnick has had a lot of experience doing this kind of work in Chatham and in Harwich. He has over 100 spaces. We got approval for an 18-person dormitory in downtown Chatham in the bottom of the Colonial Building, if you know where the Sandy's Diner is. That's the Colonial Building. And the Chatham Chief of Police is preparing a letter to send to the zoning board that, that Mr. Rudnick and his company, primarily his staff, do a very good job maintaining control of the situation. The people who are staying in these places are generally Europeans, although there's some folks from Asia as well. They're over here trying to make money. They don't have cars. Most of them have 2 jobs instead of 1.
Bicycles.
And they bicycle around. One of the great things about this particular property is it's right on the bus line. We think that's great. The companies that Mr. Rudnick has served up till now, Chatham Bars Inn, Waquasit, Stop and Shop, Snow Inn, and multiple restaurants up and down Route 28. And one of the things that I hadn't thought of in making a presentation was something that the fire chief brought out at the department head meeting we had with Charlene and the other department heads, which was, well, Mr. Rudnick has places that are all safe and got doors and windows that open and they're all above ground, and there are a lot of these young people, most of them sort of college age, mid-20s, and they're living in basements with no real adequate access, and the event of a fire, so it's, there's a demand that our economy requires, and then there's sort of the moral demand that the chief pointed out, that we have to provide safe spaces for these young people. In addition, and so that would go primarily from early April to
End of October.
Mid-October, end of October.
And we leave it open if the town wanted to have any special projects, as in Chatham, when they're doing the bridge or they're doing the rotaries, they've asked us, these companies come in and we put them up, and we will open it up, otherwise we close it.
Yeah, the SUDI, the Kennedy Company, may have some wintertime uses for trainees or sales conferences or the like, but we don't think that would be particularly significant. So there'd be 2 buildings where the workers would stay, and then the main building would be used essentially for security, have somebody who would live there, who would be a responsible person, maintaining, somebody to answer questions, respond to concerns, and just be on
Listening to the
site.
school saying you had 11 languages, we have more than 11 languages.
Yeah, so in any event, so the fact that if the selectmen would consider supporting the application by a letter to the zoning board, we think that it's a difficult decision for the zoning board. We think the more support we have administratively or personally, the easier it is for the zoning board to make that decision. So that's why we're here.
And one other thing that I know, and if Chief Clark wants to speak as well, but we also, when looking at the siting of the buildings, was done well to, kind of keep it in the areas that were more protective of the other residential areas, so that there was the noise factor, et cetera.
And all the other buildings will be all open space on the
On the
right-hand
other
side.
right, on the more residential side. Chief?
To the board, I've always been concerned about that property, and in fact, we did have a very large fire there. There's still buildings there that are potential hazards. I think it's important to our economic growth. This is a huge, huge step forward for the town of Harwich, to have someone like Mr. Rudnick and the Kennys come in and do this project. It's a great project. They have done every single thing we have asked as far as life safety. It's expensive, and they did not blink. They agreed, and I commend them for their dedication to the project. I was vocal at our smaller meeting, and I just can't say how important this project is to the town, and it's a really great step forward. And very quickly to that point is that we do sponsor a cookout with the J1 workers at the end of the year, and I was appalled at these good college kids come and work here in the living conditions that they come and put up with here. For these great foreign kids to come here, as an American, I was embarrassed how we make them, how they have to live. So this is a really great step forward, and hopefully will inspire other business people to take advantage of these properties. And I fully endorse the project, and I certainly hope that the board will endorse the project. My frustration is the process takes too long.
Thank you, Chief. And just for the board, I used to work with Ron Rudnick, who did a lot of these rental units, as Bill Riley has said here tonight. And the staff does a great job, his current staff. And so just full disclosure on my behalf.
We
Michael?
have 28 apartments right next door here, which are workforce housing, is different kind of workforce housing, but those are the kind of people that we have to keep in this town so that young people will stay here. And it's a difficult, Chatham is very hard, and we could convert those into making more expensive apartments. It won't work where we're coming from. So we've had that now, I don't know, 12 or 15 years next door. And our staff is very good at this. And it's been a learning curve, dealing with a lot of people involved on the Cape. We have a woman who helps with the bicycles. We have people that help with the visas. You know, you never know what's going to happen in the United States government, whether they're going to stop the visas. You know, it's the American kids, I want to say they lie, they misrepresent to a lot of the store owners or the restaurants and saying they're going to stay the whole summer, and they're out August 1st or August 8th, and they're off. And the companies that are suffering here. So it's a real need here, and we hope that you guys understand what we're doing.
Thank you. Michael?
I move that we send a letter to the zoning board showing our support for a variance for the Stone Horse property.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Any further discussion? Ed, go ahead.
Yeah, I know what you're gonna say.
I need to actually recuse myself. I'm Vice President of the Board of Outer Cape Health, who the proponents are buying the property from, so we have sort of an interest in it, but.
And I'm not that high, but I'm a volunteer working with Otter Cape Health. But I was gonna ask the board's indulgence that since we're not directly involved, since this is a support letter, that we could support this.
Yep, and let me just,
And that's up to the rest of the board, I think, at this point, if I follow the rules correctly.
so Dawn and then Art. And
Yeah, I don't want to get, thank you, Madam Chair. I don't want to get too deep in the weeds, but I know that one of the things, you know, Lawyer Riley is correct. The use table is kind of obscure. The question I have here is, and I think you alluded to that earlier, I just kind of want to focus in on this, because I have no problem at all supporting the concept of the project, but are we talking about people who are essentially at the retail level coming in and checking in, or the companies?
No,
The
no,
companies
no,
facilitate that by contacting?
They arrive in April, you know, during the month of April. They arrive during the month of April.
They stay.
They stay until middle of October.
Right.
What I'm driving at, though, is, say, CBI. They want to put...
We have quite a few.
Yeah, they want to
have
put
40
people up.
CBIs.
They contact you?
Correct.
Oh,
They're human resources, and they handle the visas with the European company. They have to have a job signed before they can come over here.
That's what I'm saying. There's some sort of intermediary process here where they're
Yes.
vetted and brought
And
into you.
they get in touch with
as-
us, and then we pick it up the ball from that fact.
Sure.
Yeah.
And then they'll have somebody at the main building to monitor the site
Yep.
during that time period that it's open. Art?
Yeah, Art Bowden, Housing Committee Chair. This is great. When it comes to housing, no matter what level you're talking about, I'm for it. The caveat here is that it's going to be basically housing from April to October. And we still have a great need year-round. And so once again, we're going to have a housing stock on Cape Cod that's empty for a period of time. We got too much emptiness on Cape Cod when it comes to housing. We got too much housing, but it's only utilized a short period of time. In the development of this, and I don't want to stand in the way of it, could there be something carved out for year-round residents?
Ed?
Thank you.
I can respond to that. You know, the building's not set up for year-round residency. It's basically a dormitory. 2 people to a room, a couple of different facilities on each floor, you know, communal laundry.
They have a couple of lounges in the building. They have the place with their bicycles. They all have locked areas. And if any of the board wants to see one, we just finished one underneath Sandy's Diner. That's pretty much how it's going to be. Materials and what we give the people.
Yeah,
We could interrupt Bill for a second. If it made it easier for the town that we could carve out so many apartments, okay, 1-bedroom apartments in one of the buildings, you know, 10% or 20%, how we deal with 40Bs, or, you know, but it's going to be more difficult to be dealing with 2 different kinds of people that are within the subject. But if it makes it easier for the town, okay, to understand that I understand the housing situation year-round, and I understand when we have to do 20% on a 40B or something like that, we could try to work that out, but I prefer try to keep it all one kind of situation.
Ed?
And just a comment, the fact that you're essentially providing for 180 people who every year come in and compete for a limited amount of space, taking that pressure off the housing market is going to ease things.
Well, it's gonna be a lot safer, okay?
Yeah, a lot
As the
safer.
chief says, we have to meet all the rules and regulations, all the exits, all the buzzers, all the whistles, all the alarm systems that, you know, just like a new building. One thing, it'll be a lot safer.
Sure.
Okay. Did you have a further question?
No, I just was going to comment that we're not designing the place for you in this venue.
I understand.
No,
but-
so, moved,
Well, I need indulgence whether I can vote or not.
oh, right, sorry.
Just to that point, I think and this is just, the state
Yeah.
makes the rulings, but, you know, I get asked this stuff all the time. I think as a corporate officer, you have a different standard. So I can see Selectman McManus, you know, recusing himself. A volunteer for an organization, you're not in a decision-making capacity. So I would think that you're perfectly within your rights to vote.
I agree.
I can't see how that's
Probably not
really
going to need it,
conflict.
though.
Okay,
It's
so
going to pass anyway, so.
it was
Yeah.
moved and seconded, correct? Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you very much. If anyone wants to see one, I'd be more than happy to show them.
Thanks for your
Thank
patience
you very
tonight.
much, appreciate it.
It was enjoyable. We love learning about the schools.
Civics. You guys need a project manager on that
Yeah,
environmental.
right, well-
okay, because this is an endless pit.
And we had
Okay, and I'm sitting there
100,000.
listening to this, and I deal with a lot of negotiations. You guys, it's cheap if you guys hire a man that answers to you.
I agree.
And following this guidance. That's
And
my
we,
opinion.
and we had the
where were
money.
you when you-
And I do pay a lot of taxes in this town.
We're still on
Where were
TV.
we when we needed you?
Still on TV.
We did have, no, but we had $100,000 set aside, and we took that money out, which I wish we never did that. Okay, so now, Chris, go ahead, I'm sorry to interrupt that
That's
onto
fine.
the town
I
administrator.
just have a couple, and I'm gonna make it brief this evening. I just wanted to announce that I did have a contract on the golf for that we did enter into, Finch Services for one Brandon Dual Express reel grinder. Apparently, this is a device that actually grinds the wheels to help cut the grass to a certain level. So we did go through the process, and that is underneath the $50,000 threshold, but I did want to just kind of disclose that to the board.
Chris, this is not a lease. I mean, this is not a purchase, right? It's a lease, just so we're all clear.
I believe it is a purchase.
It's a 3-year lease.
3-year lease, sorry. Thank you. Sorry.
I guess the only other question I have, if somebody could answer, is just there's one document at the end of this, and it says it's $28,000. That was one of the
I think we
bids.
included some of the bids.
So,
I'll let you finish.
yeah, that's my question. If we had a bid for $28,000, why are we taking one for $48,000?
Sure. So that person did not even provide a lease. And I don't believe that they even met the minimum specifications, talking to Sean Fernandez.
Thank you, Evan.
And then, Madam Chair, the next item I have is just on the treasure chest stickers. Just wanted to kind of, I know that you had expressed some concern that during the weekend, town hall's not open. How do people get the treasure chest sticker? So I appreciate Mr. Hooper kind of working with his staff that we do have on a case-by-case basis if someone needs to pick one up on a Saturday or Sunday. I would ask people if they could, Saturday is a busy day, and if they could try to time it so it doesn't cause too much of a backup. But we do have those available for distribution.
Madam Chair, to my astonishment, we ended up giving out 20 over the weekend. I had no idea there was this type of demand for these things. The Treasure Chest volunteers have been doing a real good job, and they make sure that the sticker matches the plate on the car. And some of them have been handing them around to others, their neighbors possibly, or some other unique situations. But it seems like this has helped out a great deal at least this initial weekend.
And we appreciate you taking that on because, you know, and to that point, we do encourage people that if they're able to come into town hall and not even have to tie up the line, but certainly to your point is to try not to.
And just maybe to make, you know, life go a little smoother, please have your form of identification, so that way, you know, we're not having our people try to guess
Right.
who's who. So, you know, if you're planning on going, make sure you have your clear identification, so that way we can prove that you're a Harwich resident. This is a Harwich resident-only program that we're trying to engage in.
And again, Tom briefed me this evening and said Tom Caruso, Treasure Trust Chairman, briefed me and says that he still is getting quite an onslaught of out-of-town people showing up and being quite angry that they're not allowed. I would have thought by 4 or 5 months after the fact, it would all be vetted out, but apparently not.
Still good. Well, we appreciate all the volunteers, you know, working, and I know that they are subject to some difficult discussions, so, you know, we do appreciate all they do, and certainly appreciate that you're having your staff help with that, because I think, you know, to some people, they don't realize, and so then they get there and they have stuff, and if they have a dump sticker and everything else, it seems to make sense, but, so thank you, Link.
I think it's a win-win. Thank you.
Thank you.
And then just a last one, I know we started the meeting with the DHY meeting, so I'll end the meeting with the DHY meeting, October 25th at 6 o'clock over at the Dennis Council on Aging, and all are encouraged to attend, Selectmen, Finance Committee, and Wastewater Committee.
General public.
And in the general public. That will be televised too, so if you're unable to attend and you want to get the information, once Dennis does it, they'll send it over to our cable, and we'll put it on our cable station.
We posted for that, Chris?
Yes, we did post for that. And that concludes my report this evening, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Ed, did you have something?
Well, just, you know, another announcement for the 25th, if you don't want to hear about wastewater, but are concerned about the upcoming elections at the Cape Cod Realtors Association facilities on Mid-Cape, is it Mid-Cape Drive off of exit 7? Off of Willow Street.
Off of Willow.
CCIAOR?
Yeah, they're having a debate of the state senate and congressional candidates, starting at 6:30, I believe.
Right. Don,
Harwich Historical Society did week 2 of its graveyard tours. I made it back without a car hitting me this time. Anyone who hasn't gone to that, though, they really should. It's
I'd like to
it's
go
a
to that.
neat way to hear about the history of Harwich.
That's cool.
And what spook do you play?
I was Obed Brooks Jr.
Larry, do you have any?
Not after that, no.
Go Sox, that's all I have to say.
That's right. Yeah, have fun at the game.
Thank you, and so can someone?
Motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second.